121. Lorien Dewey and his companions stayed in the woodland realm for 2 days. When they finally took their leave of Thranduil, Dewey, by the king's permission, installed a fireplace as a flue network node and gifted Thranduil some flue powder. The king of the Wood Elves found the flue network intriguing. He was put off by the dusty way of travel, but he immediately grasped the network's strategic value. It could bind scattered forces across Middle-earth, transmitting news, or even people at the first instant. That such a powerful tool was in Dewey's hands alone raised Thranduil's esteem for him. After farewells, the traveling party acquired an additional passenger. The four rode on Smaug as they resumed their westward journey. Legolas, taking his first ride on a dragon, was electrified, his usual reserve barely covering his delight. The flush on his pointed ears betrayed him. As they swept west through Mirkwood, the dragon's passing sent giant spiders scuttling in alarm. Legolas immediately loosed his bow, each arrow finding a spider's head, and was about to shoot the remaining two. Dewey raised a hand to halt him. Legolas looked at him, puzzled. Dewey smiled. "Don't kill them all. Leave two for me." With a flick of his wand, he petrified two of the fleeing spiders, then used a levitation charm to bring them over and slipped them into his spatial bag. The trick left Legolas, Bilbo, and even Gandalf staring. "Dewey, what do you want with two giant spiders?" Gandalf asked, bemused. Dewey chuckled. "Don't you think their silk is incredibly tough? I have a spell for weaving. If I can make cloth from spider silk, the defense would be stronger than most armor, and it would be worth a lot." They were speechless. Gandalf raised an eyebrow. "You were given treasure from the Lonely Mountain enough to make you one of the richest in Middle-earth. Why are you worrying about making money?" Dewey gave Smaug a disgruntled kick in the flank. "Because I have a dragon to feed now. No amount of money is enough." He thought of how the Wood Elves had barely concealed their smiles when the party left, how even Thranduil had breathed a private sigh. The thought stung. Smaug had eaten well over 100 sheep and pigs in 2 days and had emptied cellars of wine. The elves had taken up bows and gone hunting to replenish stores. Dewey had not realized a dragon that never slept could have such an appetite. He longed to find somewhere the dragon would go back to sleep so he would not have to feed him constantly. But Smaug insisted, with absolute resolve, that a dragon must sleep on a bed entirely covered in gold. He would rather die than be denied it. Even Dewey's threat of the Crucio did not make him relent. In Smaug's view, a dragon's sole, lifelong ideal was to sleep on a mountain of treasure. Dragons would attack dwarves and even each other to steal such hoards. That hunger for gold, Dewey realized, explained why dragons had become so rare. Smaug might be the last known one. Dewey promised Smaug that once they reached Weathertop, the treasure from the Lonely Mountain would become his bed. Only then did the dragon relent from his endless grumbling, though he still grumbled that a tenth of that hoard was not nearly enough to cover him. He spoke ruefully of the days when he had lain on the Lonely Mountain's mountains of gold. Now he followed a poor owner, and the contrast stung. Dewey felt his teeth ache just listening. He sometimes wished he could Avada the blasted dragon. Had he tamed a mount? No, he had invited a venerable master who devours gold. Gandalf and Bilbo laughed at Dewey's complaints. Even Legolas's lips twitched. They had expected Smaug to be fierce and terrible, but not comically so. As for Dewey's talk of money, they knew he was half joking. They all agreed the idea of spinning spider silk into armor was clever. They had watched giant spider silk resist even elven blades. Protective clothing woven from it, if feasible, would be superior to many armors, lighter, softer, and inexhaustible in supply. Legolas even considered telling his father to capture some spiders so elven craftsmen could weave their silk into tough armor. They rode Smaug through Mirkwood, paused for afternoon tea at Bjorn's, then departed. This time, their route turned south along the Anduin rather than climbing the misty mountains to Rivendell. Dewey needed to visit Lothlorien first. He had promised to make wands for Elrohir, Elladen, and Arwen. Legolas had now added his own request, and Gandalf had accepted Dewey's offer to craft a staff for him. Lothlorien was the logical stop. Lothlorien lies east of the Misty Mountains and west of the Anduin, separated from Dol Guldur and the southernmost reaches of Mirkwood only by the river. The Nimrodel, born in the Misty Mountains, joins the celebrant to form the Anduin here, making a beautiful delta. Lothlorien is shrouded and preserved by the power of Nenya, the Ring of Water. Even time seems to take care not to erode it. The valley remains a sacred, timeless refuge, the last sanctuary in Middle-earth. At the outskirts, they felt the invisible boundary of Lothlorien. Without the welcome of those within, it would be difficult to find the right way in. Luckily, Gandalf was a frequent visitor. At his suggestion, Smaug waited outside, and the others followed Gandalf along the riverbank upstream. The trees were evergreen, the grass lush, as if an eternal early spring endured here, always green, hardly touched by age. Golden leaves drifted down from upstream. They shone like genuine metal and would have tempted even a dragon. As they penetrated the forest, green shades gave way to gold. In the heart of Lothlorien rose vast malorn trees, silver-gray bark and leaves of brilliant gold, as if cast in metal. Golden leaves fell and carpeted the earth. The golden wood took its name honestly. There they met 3 elves. Haldir, long have you waited, Gandalf greeted the elf in front. Haldir smiled and inclined his head. Mithrandir, the lady has seen your arrival and has sent us to welcome you. Please come. Gandalf smiled wryly. The lady's sight is long indeed. I dare say she knew we were in Lothlorien the moment we crossed its bounds. They followed the elves to Caras Galadhon, the city in the trees. The city sat atop a green hill crowned with towering malorn trees. A moat and verdant walls ringed the slope. The Lothlorien elves lived in platforms and dwellings high in the trees. Caras Galadhon was a city of branches. Lanterns hung like stars among the boughs, and the hill seemed bathed in a galaxy of lights. The largest malorn sheltered the hall of Lothlorien's lord and lady. Beneath it, on the green lawn, a central spring fed a silver basin and overflowed into a lake. The outflow became the Aethel Anduin. The spring was said to wash away weariness and to hold uncommon magic. Along the Aethel Anduin lay Galadriel's private garden, plants and flowers that bloomed in all seasons. They climbed the spiral wooden stairs around the giant trunk until they reached a broad platform. The Lord and Lady's palace stretched elliptically around the tree, composed of several levels and a great hall. Seen from below, the platform seemed to float. Seen from the great windows, one could overlook all of Lothlorien's beauty. Inside the hall, the thrones of Lord and Lady sat together at the front, equal in place and title. Off to the side, a simple spiral staircase rose to a higher platform. That was where the rulers rested. Gandalf moved like someone familiar with every step. Dewey, Bilbo, and Legolas, new to Lothlorien, looked around in amazement. Soon a pair of elves descended hand in hand from the upper stairs, and the hall seemed to brighten with their presence. All eyes turned to them as to a light. They were Celeborn and Galadriel, Lord and Lady of Lothlorien. Mithrandir, Celeborn said, the golden leaves have fallen and covered many years of your footfalls. What storms have delayed you? His voice was like spring thunder, deep, clear, and quietly restoring. Tall and stately, silver-haired, dressed in robes of simple richness, he carried an ancient calm. Where Elrond was like a spring breeze and Thranduil like the deep wood, Celeborn seemed the steadfast guardian of an old home, composed, serene, every edge honed by time. No storm can unsettle you, Lord Celeborn, Gandalf replied with a small bow, except perhaps for the presence of your lady's exceeding beauty. Celeborn smiled at the compliment. Galadriel, hand in hand with him, turned her luminous gaze on the rest. Young wizard, we meet again. Her eyes met Dewey's, and a voice echoed in his mind. Chapter 121, Prophecy. In the Great Hall, Celeborn and Gandalf finished their greetings and turned to Duir, Bilbo, and Legolas. Their scrutiny rested mostly on Duir. This must be the black-robed wizard Duir, the one who subdued Smaug, slew the Orc kings Azog and Bolg, and changed the tide at the Battle of 5 Armies, someone murmured. Celeborn's tone held genuine admiration. Hearing of you is one thing. Meeting you is another. You are younger and more remarkable than I imagined. Thank you for your kind words, Lord Celeborn, Duir said, bowing and smiling as he accepted the praise. Though Celeborn was not as famed as Elrond, Thranduil, or Galadriel, he was no minor lord. His power and status in Lorien were unquestioned. If he had not been formidable, he would not have won Galadriel's esteem. Duir never looked down on him as merely the man behind Galadriel. Seeing Duir's modest but unbending manner, appreciation flickered in Celeborn's eyes. Galadriel once told me that Middle-earth would welcome an incomparable wizard. It seems her sight remains true. Lady Galadriel overpraises me, Duer replied. I am only a wizard. An ordinary wizard does not subdue a great dragon, Celeborn chuckled. His emerald eyes then softened as he regarded Legolas, like an elder addressing a promising youth. Thranduil's sun shines as bright as the stars. I see a trace of your father in you. Is your father well? Legolas bowed respectfully. My father is well, Lord Celeborn. He sends his greetings. He often speaks of you, saying you have wisdom deeper than Mirkwood's oldest trees and insight richer than the deep lakes of the Misty Mountains. Though Thranduil and Celeborn were not kin by blood, their shared Sindarin heritage made them close. Celeborn treated Legolas like a junior of his own house. After a few polite exchanges, Celeborn turned to Bilbo. Galadriel watched them all in silence, her presence gentle and unspoken. When the formal greetings concluded, she instructed the elves to prepare a modest feast for their guests. The dinner was not lavish, but it was warm and solemn. No raucousness disturbed the hall. The Lord and Lady of Lorien sat at the high table with Gandalf, Duer, Bilbo, and Legolas. Another elf joined them, Arwen, daughter of Elrond and Celebrian, known as Undomiel, who had been raised in Lorien. The granddaughter of Celeborn and Galadriel, Arwen moved with the lithe grace of her kin. Long, dark hair, deep, luminous gray eyes, skin pale as polished jade. Her bearing combined Maya-touched dignity with elven elegance and the free will of men. She was beloved in Lorien, bright and lively as she leaned close to Celeborn and Galadriel, watched over with their quiet, adoring eyes. Duer found himself admiring the princess. If Galadriel was like a brilliant moon ruling the night, Arwen was a soft, shimmering star, Undomiel indeed, gentle, radiant, and quietly captivating. When their gazes met, Arwen paused, then offered a polite, gentle smile and a nod. Duer, free of any embarrassment at being caught, returned the nod with a calm, courteous smile. Inwardly he felt a twinge of pity, such beauty choosing mortality for love, a path that might one day lead to loneliness and sorrow. In a far future, he vaguely remembered, she would give up much and suffer, but that time had not yet come. Aragorn was still a boy. Duer's thoughts wandered mischievously. Perhaps he could arrange a meeting between Arwen and the young Aragorn sooner. If she still fell for him, who could argue with fate? He had barely let the thought stray when a mechanical voice intruded in his mind after a long silence. Hogwarts sign-in system, locating Lothlorien. Do you wish to sign in? Duer blinked, then answered inwardly. Sign in. Sign in successful. Congratulations on obtaining the prophecy talent. Prophecy talent? Duer froze as an image of Professor Trelawney, eccentric and unsteady, flickered through his imagination. If this was the kind of talent it meant, he did not know what to do with it. Then, suddenly, his mind cleared. It felt as if a third eye had opened. Perceptions sharpened, a new depth of sight and reason settled over him. A mysterious, measured aura wrapped him. He felt both more rational and more inscrutable. The change was subtle, but not invisible. Galadriel, Gandalf, and Celeborn all looked at Duer with surprise. That is, Celeborn's composed face fractured for the first time into doubt and astonishment. The power of fate, Galadriel said, her eyes glittering with certainty. Duer, are you well? Gandalf asked, concern threading his voice. Duer opened his mouth to answer, but images he had never seen before poured into his mind. He spoke before he could stop himself. The age of the elves will end, and the age of men will begin. On the day the broken sword is reforged, he who lost his crown will be king again. Darkness will rise anew, and the Dark Lord seeks what was lost to him. His voice was low and flat, devoid of personal emotion as he recited the prophecy. In the great hall, everyone listened in stunned silence to the hollow, detached cadence. Only after the last sentence left his lips did his eyes refocus. He gave a small cough, and the moment broke. The assembled looked at him with renewed curiosity. Duer, you never told me you could prophesy, Gandalf said with a long, complicated sigh. Duer managed a sheepish cough. To be honest, I only just discovered it myself. Gandalf shook his head. He suspected Duer had hidden depths, but he had his own secrets and preferred not to pry. He turned to Celeborn and Galadriel. What do you make of his words? Prophecies were not unheard of in Middle-earth. Glorfindel had once foretold that the Witch King would not fall by the hand of man, a prophecy fulfilled when Éowyn and Merry together laid him low. Malbeth of Arthedain had predicted events tied to the paths of the dead. Even Elrond and Galadriel had glimpses and foresight gained from long ages of memory and wisdom. So while they were surprised at Duer's gift, they were not incredulous. Their concern lay with the meaning. Their long sight and wisdom parsed the vague phrases and plucked out the true threat. "The prophecy is clear," Galadriel said, gazing eastward with mounting worry. "Dark forces rise again. Sauron and his servants are seeking the One Ring." Celeborn frowned. "We believed the ring was lost when Isildur fell at the Gladden Fields. Orcs, men, and elves searched the area and found nothing. If the ring is not there, where has it gone?" "Either it lies hidden somewhere, or it is in someone's hands," Gandalf replied. At those words, Bilbo's face tightened. He bowed his head and unconsciously touched the object in his pocket. Since he had come to Lorien, the ring had felt unnaturally quiet, as if merely an ordinary golden ring. Duer noticed Bilbo's furtive motion. He had brought the hobbit here partly because the ring was a danger. The longer Bilbo kept it, the more it would corrode his mind and spirit. Duer had hoped Galadriel and the others might act to remove or destroy it sooner rather than later, perhaps casting it into Orodruin before Sauron had fully returned, sparing the world decades of growing peril. He had no intention of following any prescribed plot. Why wait for calamity? Seeing Bilbo's inner struggle, Duer moved to his side and placed a hand lightly on his shoulder. Bilbo shivered and turned stiffly to look at him. Duer's voice dropped, meant only for the hobbit's ears. "Do you remember what I told you before? Think of Gollum. Do you want to become like him?" At the name and image, Gollum's twisted, hollow face sprang unbidden into Bilbo's mind. He shuddered. Chapter 123, Exposing the Ring. Gandalf, Galadriel, and Celeborn were deep in discussion about the prophecy and possible hiding places for the One Ring when a hesitant hand slowly rose. I know where the One Ring is," came a small voice. Gandalf and the others turned at once, surprised to see Bilbo standing there. "Bilbo, you say you know where the ring is?" Gandalf asked, astonished. Bilbo squirmed under their stares. Only when Duer's hand rested reassuringly on his shoulder did he find the courage to speak. "Actually, the ring you're talking about is with me." He reached into his pocket and laid the little golden band into his palm. Every eye focused on it. Gandalf stared intently, his face unreadable as he desperately tried to confirm what he feared. Celeborn watched with equal vigilance, as if bracing against something dangerous. Galadriel stepped forward, drew close to Bilbo, and extended a finger as if to touch the metal. "Lady Galadriel," Gandalf warned, alarmed. Celeborn, though her husband, did not restrain her, but his expression was anxious. At the last moment, Galadriel flinched back, as if burned, stopping just a few centimeters from the ring. "I cannot be certain this is the One Ring, but I sense an evil in it," she said, solemn. "So dark, so terrible, it can corrupt hearts." Gandalf spoke then, voice steady. "The One Ring was forged by Sauron in Mount Doom. To be sure, we must subject it to fire." Duer patted Bilbo on the shoulder. "Bilbo, put the ring on the table." Bilbo's arm was beginning to ache, so he hurriedly placed the ring on a nearby stone slab. Duer spoke a word and cast a flame. Under the scorching heat, letters slowly surfaced on the band. Gandalf leaned closer, angling his head to read the inscription. "One ring to rule them all, one ring to find them. One ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them," Galadriel finished calmly. "It is confirmed, the One Ring has returned." Celeborn's brow tightened. He watched the ring with a troubled look. "With the One Ring back, Middle-earth may never be at peace again." When the ring was confirmed, Gandalf turned to Bilbo, baffled. "Bilbo, where did you get this?" Bilbo did not try to hide it. "When I fell into Goblin Town, I dropped to the bottom of a chasm and found it there. It belonged to that golem." Gandalf understood. "No wonder I didn't see you when I searched with the Palantir. You had the ring then?" Bilbo nodded. Gandalf, still uneasy, examined him. "You've had it so long. Have you felt anything wrong?" He checked Bilbo carefully. Bilbo shook his head. "I'm all right. Duer warned me to be careful. I hardly ever used it, except in danger." Gandalf's gaze shifted to Duer. "Duer, you knew Bilbo had the ring all along?" Duer looked sheepish. He had not expected Bilbo to say so openly. "When we left Goblin Town, Bilbo told me." Gandalf's disapproval was clear. The ring is dangerous. Even the strongest can be corrupted. You should have told me at once. Bilbo hurried to take responsibility. It was my fault. I told Duer not to tell anyone. He only insisted I show it now because I asked him to. Enough, Mithrandir, Galadriel said gently, and her interjection stopped Gandalf's scolding. Duer and Bilbo both breathed in relief and shot grateful looks to the lady. An angry Gandalf was an imposing thing indeed. The attention returned to the ring. None of them dared touch it. They all treated it as an enemy. Yet they marveled that Bilbo could hold it without apparent harm, proof, they said, of the hobbit's remarkable resistance to the ring's malice. They debated how to destroy it. Legolas struck the ring with his elven blade. The recoil sent pain through his arm, but the ring bore no mark. I recall 4 of the 7 dwarf rings were undone in dragonfire, Celeborn suggested. Perhaps Duir's dragon. Gandalf shook his head. The one ring was forged in Mount Doom. Dragonfire might consume dwarven rings, but it cannot unmake the one. Then he looked to Duir. Duir, I remember you conjured a terrible fiendfire on the battlefield, one that could melt the hardest steel. Can you test it against the ring? Duer was as curious as anyone. In the world of magic, fiendfire could destroy Horcruxes. The One Ring was, in some ways, like a perfected Horcrux. If a Horcrux remained, a wizard would not truly die, so if the ring remained, Sauron's spirit might endure. Still, fiendfire was dangerous and hard to control. If I cast it here among the tree houses, it could spread. I need an open space. They moved to a clearing. Under a hush of watching eyes, Duer loosed fiendfire at the ring. A spitting blue flame leapt from his wand and engulfed the band. The fire lashed and tried to expand, even to burn back upon the wand. Duer checked it sharply, keeping it compact. Even small, the fiendfire crackled with the aura of annihilation. Everyone's faces grew solemn, but hopeful. This terrible fire should be able to unmake the ring, shouldn't it? Hours passed. The fiendfire burned a deep pit in the hard earth, yet the ring remained unchanged, except that it glowed red, as if heated through. When common flame had been used before, only the inscription was revealed. The metal itself stayed cold. This was different. Duer urged the fire hotter, feeding it without pause. An hour became 2, then many more. Gandalf and the elves watched with patient, grave attention. Duer, bolstered by the presence of Gandalf's ring of fire, showed no sign of faltering. After a day and a night, Duer at last let the flames die. He lifted the ring with his wand and examined it. It was smooth and whole. He frowned. Is it useless? No, Galadriel said, approaching. The fire has burned some of its power away. It is dimmer now. They peered more closely. The ring's brilliance had indeed dulled, subtle but real. Confidence grew. How long until it is entirely destroyed? Duer asked, worried. With the present power of the flames, perhaps 1,000 years, Galadriel said slowly, standing over the ring and studying it. But as your strength, Duer, grows, that time may shorten. 1,000 years is not short, then, Celeborn said, and Legolas and Arwen nodded their agreement. Duer and Bilbo exchanged private looks. Duer thought fiercely to himself that he could not wait 1,000 years. He might never live so long, and in any case he could not sustain fiendfire unceasingly without being consumed. Gandalf shook his head and leaned on his staff. 1,000 years is far too long. There are too many ways for Sauron to regain power in that time. If he discovers the ring's location, he will stop at nothing to seize it. We must find a way to destroy the ring quickly so that Sauron will be bereft of power and no longer a threat to Middle-earth. His voice carried the urgency of a man who had seen too much darkness. But how? Celeborn asked, eyes never leaving the ring. If Dragonfire cannot do it, what can? Galadriel looked east, her voice like a bell of fate. The One Ring was forged by Sauron in Mount Doom. It was born of the volcano. Only the fires of Mount Doom can unmake it. Gandalf frowned. Since Sauron was driven from Dol Guldur, he has retreated to his stronghold in Mordor, far to the east. There he has gathered orcs, trolls, corrupted Easterlings, Haradrim, and even black Númenóreans. Great beasts and fell creatures patrol the skies. Mordor is a fortress now, bristling with defenses. He has a palantir too, and keeps watch over much of the land. Gandalf's words painted a grim picture. If we try to bring the ring to Mount Doom, Sauron will likely see it before we reach the volcano. It would be delivering the ring into his hands. Unless we can draw him out, Divert his attention so he cannot guard Mordor, Celeborn suggested. But even then, Sauron had been grievously wounded not long ago and remade his strength by concentrating his forces in Mordor. He would not risk exposing himself until he was sure. For now, he was dug in, vigilant and deadly. Chapter 123, Destruction Plan. Gandalf, Galadriel, and Celeborn had intended to cast the One Ring into Mount Doom and destroy it. But Mordor was now ringed by Sauron's forces. Neither air nor ground could penetrate it easily. Worse, they feared a connection between the ring and Sauron himself, that he might sense anyone who came too close. "We should call Elrond," Gandalf said. "He understands the ring better than any of us. Perhaps he can offer another perspective." Then he turned to Duir. "Duir, I need a favor. Can you link the Floo network to here?" Duir nodded. "Lord Celeborn, Lady Galadriel, may I borrow your hearth?" Galadriel smiled and inclined her head. "Elrond has spoken to me of your magic. Let us see it. This way, if Arwen ever wishes to visit Rivendell, she need not cross the Misty Mountains," Galadriel added. A flicker of sadness passed across her face. The memory of her daughter Celebrian's capture and torture by orcs on the road to Lorien, and of Celebrian's eventual voyage to Valinor for healing, was an old wound. That sorrow had been the reason Elrond had entrusted Arwen to their care. Galadriel's words carried the quiet hope that a safer connection would let Arwen travel freely between Rivendell and Lorien. With their permission, Duir wove a spell over the hearth, linking it to Rivendell's fireplace. He scattered a handful of Floo powder into the green flames and stepped into them. He vanished. Except for Gandalf and Bilbo, who had seen the trick before and were not surprised, everyone else stared. Arwen's eyes shone as she watched. Because of Celebrian's fate, her grandparents and father had been reluctant to let her make the long and perilous journey over the Misty Mountains. She had grown up mainly in Lorien. Now, with this magic, coming and going to Rivendell would be easy. She thought about the young wizard who had made Galadriel's staff, the same man said to have forged a staff that eased the casting of spells. Galadriel had even given him the Elessar Emerald in thanks. Duir was nothing like the other wizards of Middle-earth. His sorcery seemed fresher, more ingenious. Arwen found herself suddenly eager to see what kind of staff he might make for her. Moments later, the hearth flared green again. Elrond stepped out first, Duir right behind him. "Father," Arwen ran forward, graceful and quick. "Arwen," Elrond murmured, stroking his daughter's hair with affection, then inclining his head to Celeborn and Galadriel. "Lord Celeborn, Lady Galadriel." As lords of high standing, Celeborn and Elrond were equals, yet Elrond's manner toward his in-laws was respectfully deferent. With Elrond's arrival, all eyes turned once more to the ring. Elrond looked at it with a burdened expression. "In the War of the Last Alliance, I was herald to High King Gil-galad. Sauron, clutching the One Ring, was invincible. Even Gil-galad and Elendil together could scarcely match him. That battle was terrible. Gil-galad, High King of the Noldor, and Elendil, King of Gondor and Arnor, fell. Narsil, the Blessed Sword, was broken by Sauron. Only when Isildur, son of Elendil, used the shards of Narsil to cut the ring from Sauron's hand did he lose his power and his form dissipated. It was a costly victory for the Last Alliance. I tried to persuade Isildur to throw the ring into Mount Doom then, to destroy it forever." Elrond's voice grew sad. But Isildur was taken by the ring's lure. He refused. Later, he was ambushed and slain near the Gladden Fields, and the ring was lost. "I had hoped that the ring would be carried by the Anduin to the sea," Elrond went on. "I never imagined it would reappear today." He looked at Bilbo, amazement and something like relief in his face. "Perhaps it is fate. Hobbits are a strange, unexpected people, small, simple, given to quiet love of home and little desire for power. The ring's power has far less hold upon them. Fate has allowed a hobbit to find it again." Bilbo received the look with a shy smile. Elrond's eyes shone with a cautious hope. "I believe fate has already shown us a sign. The ring's reappearance and its coming before us points to a way the shadow might end." They returned to the question of how to destroy the ring. Elrond agreed that it must be cast into Mount Doom. "But not now," he said. "After the last battle at Dol Guldur, I sent word south to the steward of Gondor. Gondor sent agents deep into Mordor, but their reports were grim. Sauron is wary now. Mordor is watched by great winged beasts from the skies, and on the ground by orcs, trolls, corrupted men, dark beasts, and even descendants of the giant spider Ungoliant. It is heavily guarded, with formidable defenses. To reach Mount Doom from outside is practically impossible. Then what is the plan, Lord Elrond? Gandalf asked. Sauron will not march forth on his own. He will remain hidden to rebuild his strength. Only if an allied army strikes him and forces him into the open might a chance be made to slip a small party into Mount Doom. Elrond shook his head. The kingdoms of men are weakened. Arnor is fallen in the north. In the south, Gondor has no king, only a steward. Rohan keeps its own rule. Unless there is a king of sufficient standing to rally men and take counsel with the elves again, unless we can forge anew an alliance of men and elves, breaking through to Mordor will be beyond us. His thoughts turned quietly to Aragorn, who lived in Rivendell. Aragorn was a direct descendant of Isildur and the last heir of Arnor's royal line. Gondor's royal house was gone. Aragorn was the most fitting claimant of the old thrones. If Aragorn were to become king of both Gondor and Arnor, Rohan would be bound to him by oath, and the forces of men would be united against Mordor. But Aragorn was only a boy at that time, too young to bear such a burden now. Then, when Sauron regains strength, he will inevitably expand once more, Elrond continued. At that point, we could meet his forces and draw his attention, while a small company secretly takes the ring into Mount Doom to destroy it. Gandalf and the others nodded, accepting the idea. But who will take the ring? Gandalf asked. It corrupts the heart. None of us dare to carry it. Who can travel so far and resist it? All eyes turned, as if by instinct, to Bilbo. He waved his hands in alarm. No! Not me! He had just survived the perils of the Lonely Mountain. He could not contemplate another such journey. Seeing his refusal, they fell silent on the matter. There was no need to decide immediately. For the present, the ring could not be destroyed, so they debated its safekeeping. Should we tell Saruman? Elrond asked. As head of the White Council, Saruman had been angered and estranged when he had not been called to Dol Guldur. If they did not tell him now, he might grow openly disloyal, which would be disastrous. Gandalf hesitated a moment, then nodded. Dol Guldur was urgent then, and there was no time. But this is the ring. We must inform him, or we might lose an ally. The others agreed. Then Duir spoke up, and the words stopped them cold. If you want Sauron to know about the ring, tell Saruman. Everyone looked at him. Gandalf frowned. Duir, what do you mean? Why would Sauron know if we tell Saruman? Elrond, Galadriel, and the rest exchanged puzzled looks. Duir's face was composed. You must know I possess a palantir, he said. Palantiri can communicate with one another. During the Battle of the Five Armies, Sauron tried to influence me through a seeing stone. I repelled him with the light of Arendil, the gift of Lady Galadriel. What you may not know is that Saruman also has a palantir, Duir went on. And he is almost certainly using it to converse with Sauron even now. If you tell Saruman about the ring, Sauron may well learn of it the next moment. Chapter 124, Fidelius Charm. At Duir's words, the assembly fell silent. Gandalf's face turned very grave. Duir, this is a serious accusation. And the man you accuse is the most eminent of the White Wizards and the head of the White Council, Elrond added, though quietly. Do you have proof that Saruman is in league with Sauron? Elrond and Galadriel, though not speaking, wore the same hard, troubled expressions. Neither wished to believe Saruman could fall. Saruman had been arrogant and proud, yes, but he had also led the struggle against the dark for countless years. If he had truly turned, it would be a devastating blow. Duir did have evidence. He raised his staff to his temple and drew out a silver thread of memory. Lady Galadriel, if you would. Galadriel nodded and led them to her private garden. In a quiet corner, water flowed from a fountain down a hill into a shallow basin of silver set upon a pedestal carved like branches. Beside it stood a silver ewer. This was Galadriel's mirror, able to reveal visions of past, present, and future. She dipped the ewer into the stream and slowly poured the water into the basin. The surface rippled, and an image, an illusory water mirror, rose like a host of phantoms. Galadriel stepped aside and gestured for Duir to continue. He stood before the basin and shook the silver thread from his staff into the water. The strand spread and sank, and at once the mirror filled with shifting scenes. They watched as Saruman used a palantir to communicate with the Dark Lord, as Gandalf's arrival at Isengard led to the wizard's betrayal and Gandalf's imprisonment in the tower, and as Saruman's works produced orc kind that feared not the sun. The visions were fragmentary, but together they made one terrible claim. Saruman was descending into darkness. Shock and disbelief rippled through the circle. Gandalf's eyes were fixed, searching the images for more. Elrond looked to Duer, astonished. Are these scenes yet to come? Are these visions of the future? Duer nodded, then shook his head. Not exactly prophecy, more like premonition. A prophecy is immutable. In truth, some of what they had seen drew on prior prophetic glimpses. More of it, however, had been assembled by Duer himself, fashioned from what he already knew and expected of Saruman's actions. He had his reasons. Saruman had once dismissed him as a third-rate sorcerer, and Duer had taken this opportunity to expose what he believed Saruman's true nature would be. He was not anxious about suspicion from Gandalf or the others. If these were things Saruman would indeed do, then he had not slandered the man. Galadriel, Elrond, and the others fell quiet, the truth finally settling in. A former ally might have betrayed them. What are we to do if Saruman has fallen? Gandalf asked at last. Elrond shook his head slowly. We have no concrete proof to confront him openly. We must proceed cautiously and secretly, gathering evidence so he is not warned. Saruman's rank and power made any rash action perilous. He was head of the Wizards and the White Council. An overt charge could throw Middle-earth into turmoil. And the matter of the One Ring must be hidden from him, Elrond added. We cannot afford any more unforeseen consequences. Galadriel and Gandalf both agreed. Then came the question, who would guard the ring? The ring could corrupt any hand that held it. Powerful beings, Gandalf, Galadriel, might be hard to sway, but if they were corrupted, the consequences would be catastrophic. For safety, the ring should not be entrusted to those of great might. Celeborn suggested Bilbo. Since fate brought the ring to Bilbo, perhaps he can keep it until we can decide what to do. Celeborn did not say aloud another reason Bilbo seemed safer. He was the smallest threat. Even if the ring touched him, the damage might be limited. Gandalf objected. The ring's power over hobbits is less, but not absent. We should not gamble with Bilbo. Elrond agreed. Galadriel finally turned to Duer. Duer, what do you think? All eyes fell on him. Though surprised to be asked, Duer replied without hesitation. I know of someone for whom the ring would be no different than any ordinary trinket, and if the ring were in his custody, we need not fear anyone, not even Sauron, taking it from him. The question in every face, who could that be? Duer smiled. Tom Bombadil, who dwells in the Old Forest. The name brought a ripple of recognition. In Sindarin, Tom was Iarwain Ben-Adar, oldest and fatherless. Tom Bombadil was ancient, present since the elves first awoke. Some of the oldest elves had known his name. His nature was mysterious, but his power was unquestioned. Galadriel and Celeborn remembered him and did not object to the suggestion. Gandalf, however, looked uneasy. Bombadil is like a bright cloud. He won't understand the gravity of this. He might forget the ring or set it aside. He is an unreliable guardian. Duer countered gently, if care is a concern, there is Goldberry. She is prudent and attentive. Explain the gravity of the matter to her, and Tom will be held to it. Duer had spent time living with Tom and Goldberry. He knew Tom's eccentricities and Goldberry's steadiness. They had helped him in his travels. It felt fitting now to call on them. No one objected further. If Bombadil would accept the task, the ring could be safe from corruption and even from Sauron's reach. They agreed to seek Tom and Goldberry's consent. In the meantime, none wished to touch the ring, so Bilbo would keep it temporarily. Bilbo, who had not expected the ring's return to his keeping, was quietly pleased despite the burden. To protect Bilbo from the ring's subtle influence, Galadriel produced an exquisite small box engraved with elven runes and placed the ring inside, locking it away. The box had been fashioned in the age when Sauron's power was still great. It possessed a shielding quality that would greatly diminish the ring's effect on anyone near it. Duer then offered another measure. I have a Fidelius charm. It can bury the secret of the ring deep within the soul. As long as the secret keeper does not speak, no one can reveal any information about the ring, not even through legilimency. Most importantly, Even if someone knows of the ring's existence, or if the ring is placed before them, they will be unable to see it or touch it. At the description of the Fidelius charm, interest brightened every eye. The thought of hiding the ring's very presence within a trusted soul, making it inaccessible to all but those who knew the secret, promised a level of security they had not yet found. Chapter 125, The Secret Keeper. Gandalf had already seen the power of Dewey's vow charm, how it had made even the great dragon Smaug submit. So when Dewey described the Fidelius charm, a binding enchantment used to hide secrets, Gandalf urged him at once to cast it. Everyone else looked to Dewey with equal anticipation. If the One Ring could truly be secreted away, Sauron would have no way to find it. The Fidelius charm requires a secret keeper, Dewey explained. The secret of the One Ring will be stored deep within that person's soul. As long as the secret keeper never reveals it, no outsider can learn the secret. Who among you will accept this role? The position was crucial. None present were likely to betray the secret. Gandalf, Galadriel, Elrond, and Celeborn were all ideal candidates, powerful, wise, and incorruptible. Dewey had no strong preference, and he expected that one of them would step forward. Instead, the four exchanged looks, and then, to his surprise, turned to him. Gandalf spoke for them with a bright smile. One affair does not need two masters. We know little of this charm. Let Dewyer be the secret keeper. Dewey was startled. He had not expected them to entrust him with the burden, but he did not refuse. Once the role was accepted, he prepared the ritual. 8 stood in the circle: Gandalf, Elrond, Galadriel, Celeborn, Bilbo, Legolas, Arwen, and Dewey. Bilbo set the One Ring on the ground at the circle's center. With the ring as the pivot, they formed a ring and joined hands. Dewey laid his wand across their linked palms and began the incantation. Silver-gray light traced the wand tip and pooled onto the earth, coalescing into a luminous band like moonlight on the ground. With soul as casket, conceal this secret until the end, Dewey intoned as he silently spoke his name and the oath. At his voice, the light from each person surged, converged, and flowed into Dewey. The others felt a hollowing, as if something had been lifted out of them. The glowing band tightened and then became a slender ring of light that pierced inward, lodging within Dewey's heart. He felt something added to his soul, and only he would hold the key to unlock it. "All right, done," Dewey said, drawing back his wand. "Is that it?" Legolas asked, incredulous. "You can try to tell someone," Dewey invited with a thin smile. Legolas opened his mouth to speak of the ring, but a binding held him. He could not say even a fragment of the secret. Each of the others tried in turn and found the same impenetrable restriction. Gandalf chuckled and turned to Galadriel. "How do you find it, Lady Galadriel?" She smiled brilliantly and nodded. "An extraordinary magic. It has hidden all knowledge of the One Ring from us, planted deep within Dwyer's soul. I see no way to break it." Relief washed over the company. Galadriel's praise meant the ring would be safer than any of them had hoped. When Haldir later announced that the Fellowship could attend dinner, he walked past the ring placed unwittingly on the table, as if he could not see it. When Celeborn asked what he saw, Haldir shook his head. He saw nothing. With the immediate danger removed, conversation and laughter flowed easily. The mood lightened, and everyone finally took time to drink in Lorien's beauty. Lorien was timeless. Evergreen trees and soft grass, flowers always in bloom, and melon trees bearing golden fruit. Outside Valinor, melon trees did not grow anywhere else in the West, and they were said to have a lineage tied to the two trees. These trees were not only tall and lovely, but also magically potent. As a wand maker, Dewey's heart leaped. Melon heartwood was perfect wand material. Any wand master would covet a whole forest of such trees. Word of his craft had spread. Over the past days, Dewey had already begun making wands for Arwen and the others. Debts ought to be repaid at once. On hearing he would make Arwen's wand, Galadriel herself sent him a section of heartwood, cut from a branch of the tallest melon where she and Celeborn dwelt. The 5-meter length of heartwood made Dewey's eyes shine. Such a piece would yield many fine wands, and as the oldest tree in Lorien, its wood brimmed with magic. Elrond surprised him further. He produced a living branch from the white tree, the very first white tree of Gondor's southern realm. Elrond had preserved it with care. The branch was pure white and still alive. 2 top-tier materials at once delighted Dewey. He planned to make the wands for Arwen, Eladon, Elrohir, and Legolas in parallel, and perhaps fashion a few extras for his own use or for future barter. He fancied the idea of opening a wand shop of his own in Middle-earth. Of course, his wands would not be sold cheaply. The price would be in terms satisfactory to him. Making one wand or a batch did not take dramatically more time. Many steps could be performed simultaneously, so the work proceeded briskly. He even summoned Elrohir and Eladon from Rivendell to Lorien to test their compatibility with the woods. For the next month, Dewey was busy at his bench. He also did not forget to ask Elrond to heal Smaug's injured wing. "Of course," Elrond said with interest. "I am curious to see the great dragon you have tamed." To spare Lorien's elves the shock of a dragon in their forest, they met Smaug outside the woods. Dewey gave Elrond a flying broomstick. Dewey himself took to the air in his animagus form. After a brief lesson, Elrond mastered the broom's controls and followed Dewey. Even perched on a broom, Elrond's movements were graceful. Elves carried elegance into everything. They found Smaug hunting near the tree line, slaying a wild ox, and using his fire to roast it. Elrond looked on with audible admiration. "Dewyer, you have made history," he said. "Great dragons were wrought by Morgoth, cunning, violent, wicked. In ages past, they were instruments of ruin. Even Sauron could not tame such beasts, and yet you have subdued one." Dewey waved away the praise. "You flatter me, Lord Elrond. I used a bit of craft and luck. The greater feat belongs to your father, Arundel. His slaying of Ancalagon is beyond compare." Elrond's smile flickered at the mention. Ancalagon, the first winged great dragon of Morgoth, was legendary. He had been so vast he blotted the sun, the mightiest of his kind. In the War of Wrath, when Morgoth's forces were routed, he unleashed the dragons led by Ancalagon, and for a time even the Valar's host was driven back. Then Eärendil, bearing a Silmaril on his brow, arrived in his flying ship. After a day and night of combat, he slew Ancalagon. The dragon fell and shattered mountains as he struck the earth. Compared to him, Smaug was but a minor terror. Dewey's compliment warmed Elrond despite himself. Elrond's life had been harsh. His mother had leapt into the sea clutching a Silmaril. He and his brother had been taken and raised by enemies, and later he had endured the loss and exile of loved ones. Yet he retained a steady resolve and a lifelong pursuit of opposing evil. They drew near Smaug. The dragon grumbled at Dewey, complaining that Dewey had been living comfortably in Lorien and left him to fend for himself in the weather and to scavenge his meals. Elrond watched with amusement and surprise. "Shut up," Dewey snapped. "I brought Lord Elrond to heal your wing. Say another word, and we leave." At that the dragon's eyes brightened, and he fell silent. Since the spear Eglos had pierced his wing, flight had been painful and the wound slow to mend. The prospect of healing made him wary of losing the opportunity. Elrond, observing the exchange, chuckled. "Your dragon is quite a character." "Just a stupid dragon," Dewey said in exasperation. Smaug bristled at the insult, but a single glare from Dewey sent him drawing his head back and muttering no more. Chapter 126, Wand Wholesale. After Smaug had been made to lie still, Dewey and Elrond knelt by the wound at the base of the dragon's wing. Elrond studied the injury, which had been slow to close, and raised an eyebrow. "There is violent energy bound to this wound. No wonder it has not healed despite a dragon's natural recovery. The scars, they look familiar. Was it struck by Eglos?" Although it was phrased as a question, Elrond sounded certain. Dewey nodded, admiringly. "Lord Elrond's eye is always so sharp." Elrond shook his head. "Eglos left a deep impression upon me." He took from his pouch the king's grass he had gathered from Galadriel's garden, intoned a few ancient elvish words, and began to rub the leaves while laying them against Smaug's wound. King's grass, Athelas, had been brought to Middle-earth by the Númenóreans. Its thin leaves gave off a sweet, heady scent, and its healing properties were famous. It staunched blood, countered poison, and could blunt the influence of dark things. Aragorn had used it in the War of the Ring to aid Faramir, Éowyn, and Merry after wounds inflicted by the Nazgûl. Even so, the damage on Smaug had been done by Eglos, and Athelas alone could not fully undo such a wound. Elrond used it as a conduit. The true healing came from Vilya, the Ring of Air, which Elrond wore. Whereas Narya, the Ring of Fire, inspired endurance and courage, Vilya's powers were of preservation and healing. With it, Elrond was the greatest healer in Middle-earth. the one who had eased the blade wound in Frodo and who could knit torn flesh that no ordinary skill could mend. Under the combined effect of Athelas and Vilya, the torn wing closed quickly. Elrond drew his hand back. There, the wound has sealed. Try flapping them. Smaug tentatively flexed his wings. Feeling no pain, his eyes brightened. He beat them with growing vigor, sending a gust of wind whipping across the clearing. Ha! I can fly again! The wind nearly knocked Dewey off his feet. He threw up a small ward, shielding himself and Elrond from the blast, then fired a sharp hush spell at the dragon's head. Quiet! Smaug startled at the spell. He glanced at the scattered mess around him, offered an embarrassed grin, and quickly stilled. Dewey did not bind him. Seeing Smaug could fly, he permitted the dragon to go, but he repeated his warning more than once. No causing trouble, and most definitely no plundering other people's hoards. When it came to gold, Smaug's eyes were like a hound's before a bone. Dewey did not want to be the one to explain to any dwarves whose treasure went missing that a dragon had been seen flying off with their wealth. Smaug's excitement drained at the admonition. The dragon suddenly seemed subdued, and Dewey inwardly breathed a little easier. With Smaug tended, Dewey and Elrond did not linger. Returning to Lothlorien, Dewey thanked Elrond and, not wishing to make two masters do one man's work, boldly asked whether Elrond could examine his other charge. Elrond, good-natured, agreed at once. When Dewey opened his small spatial sack and revealed the bird within, Elrond's surprise showed. "Is this a hatchling of the great eagles?" Dewey nodded. "The Eagle King entrusted him to me. He was the weakest of the brood from birth. Had he stayed with them, he wouldn't have lasted. The king asked me to care for him." Elrond watched the small eagle, peering up and twittering, closely. Pity softened his features. Poor little one, he is indeed congenitally frail, and long-term undernourishment has left him very weak. If he is not properly nursed, he might never learn to fly as an adult. But it is fortunate he met you. He's improved greatly since you took him in. What have you named him? Thorondor, Dewey answered. Thorondor. Elrond's eyebrows lifted. The name of the King of Eagles, you have high hopes for him. Dewey set the hatchling on the rim of its nest and stroked the soft head as it pressed against him. His voice softened. I do not expect great deeds. I only hope the name may bring him blessing, that he may one day soar like his kin. Lord Elrond, your skill in healing is unmatched. Can you cure Thorondor's congenital weakness? Elrond nodded. I can, but it will take time. He must remain at Rivendell for a while. I hope you can entrust him to us. Dewey brightened. If he can be cured, I'll bring him to Rivendell as soon as these matters here are settled. With Smaug's wound healed and a plan in place for Thorondor, Dewey turned his attention to the wands. He had prepared 5 shafts. Carefully, he fitted the prepared cores into the tiny hollow at each wand's end, sealing shaft to core with a resin taken from the Malorn trees, and then grinding and polishing until each wand gleamed. The 5 finished wands varied in length and color, and looking at them gave Dewey a surge of satisfaction. At moonrise, he placed the 5 wands in a row beneath the sky and pointed his own wand at them. He chanted long, intricate incantations, and the wand light above seemed to gather, drawn into the wands as silver radiance. The 5 instruments shivered as if newly awakened. Faint pulses of magic, like tiny heartbeats, thrummed from them. Nearby, Arwen, Elrohir, Eladon, and Legolas waited with expectant faces. Gandalf, Galadriel, and a few others watched in silence. When Dewey finished the final ritual, he called them over. Come, choose your partners. They hurried forward, eyes fixed on the row of wands. Who goes first? Dewey asked with a smile, reading their eager faces. Then he looked to Arwen. Ladies first. Princess Arwen, you may choose. Arwen stepped forward and hesitated, looking at the 5 sticks before her. Which one is mine? Dewey smiled, cryptic. You have to try to know. He handed her a wand. 15 inches, Malorn shaft, core of Malorn fiber, and, well, a strand of Lady Galadriel's hair. Arwen took it uncertainly. What should I do? Give it a flick. She flicked. A beam of white light shot out. She brightened, thinking she had found the right one, but Dewey took the wand back with a reproving shake of his head. Close, but the length is not right. He handed another. 12 1/4 inches, Malorn shaft, core a great eagle's crest feather. Arwen flicked again. A gentle breeze stirred, lifting her dark hair. She looked down at the wand, half pleased. Dewey, however, took it back. Still not quite right. Try this, he said, but before he offered it, he reconsidered and took it back in the same quick, unreadable way. At last, under Arwen's puzzled gaze, he selected a shorter wand, the only snow-white one among them. This is the one. 9.5 inches, white wood shaft, the core, a strand of Lady Galadriel's hair. Arwen held it, and instantly it felt like an extension of her hand. She slipped into a quiet, wondrous state. The moonlight seemed to gather at her wrist and braid itself with the evenstar that hung over her chest. Those watching gasped softly. Galadriel's smile shone, pleased. Arwen, delighted, hurried to show the wand to her father and her grandmother. Dewey then gestured the 3 male elves forward, and to their surprise, placed a wand directly into each man's hand. Here, Lord Elrohir and Lord Eladon, your wands are both 15 inches, Malorn shafts, and the cores are also a strand of Lady Galadriel's hair. Legolas, this 12.25-inch Malorn shaft with the great eagle crest feather is yours. The 3 stared for a moment, as if expecting some trial like Arwen's. Dewey, don't we need to test them? Legolas asked. Dewey waved a hand, unconcerned. Test for what? I fitted them earlier. I knew which one suited you. Then why did you test Arwen just now? Eladon and Elrohir exchanged a glance. Dewey shrugged casually. Girls, he said with a grin, they always do deserve a little special treatment, more options. But the 2 brothers were not so easily mollified, and both watched him with narrowed eyes. Elves have keen senses. From nearby, Elrond's gaze sharpened as he studied Dewey, and Celeborn regarded him with steady scrutiny. Galadriel's smile carried a knowing tilt. Dewey felt a prickle run down his spine. He met their stares and forced a smile, silently hoping they had not misunderstood his methods. Chapter 128, Meditation. In the end, Dewey finally returned the wands he owed. Besides the wands for Arwen, Elrohir, Eladon, and Legolas, he had made one extra for himself, a 12-inch wand with a melon tree core and a single strand of Lady Galadriel's hair. It was his second backup wand. Ideal for white magic, its Galadriel hair core lent it strong resistance to darkness and helped protect the mind. Its one limitation was that it could not channel dark arts. With the wands finished, Dewey's business in Lothlorien was mostly done, but he did not leave at once. Gandalf was preparing a staff for him. The wood chosen was the remaining section of the melon core Galadriel had given earlier. The original piece had been 5 meters long. After making the other wands, there was still over 3 meters left, more than enough for a staff. Elven craftsmen joined Gandalf for the work, and Dewey watched from the side. Their skill was exquisite, and their aesthetic perfect. Under their hands, a staff of flawless appearance took shape. They carved natural floral motifs and twisting vines along the grain, and traced elven runes in hair-thin mithril. Gandalf held the LSR emerald that would be the staff's heart and murmured spells. The gem awoke, bathing everyone in a warm, jade light like the spring sun. The head of the staff was carved into a cluster of melon leaves. As Gandalf chanted, the carved leaves unfurled. He slipped the LSR emerald into the hollow, adjusted it precisely, and the leaves closed again to cradle the gem. After a final examination, Gandalf smiled in satisfaction and handed the finished staff to Dewey. Dewey took it eagerly. The staff was about 6 feet long, roughly his height, golden brown with smooth contours. Silver runes shimmered against the wood, floral patterns looked almost alive, and the emerald at the top glowed with a jade light that hinted at fathomless power. He grinned and tested it. Lumos, he said. Magic traveled through the staff into the emerald, and the gem flared with a brilliance that lit Karis Galadhon so brightly it could be seen beyond the forest. Dewey was delighted. A staff was a different instrument from a wand. A wand channels a wizard's inner magic. It's a steady conduit for what the caster already possesses. A staff, however, is a means to commune with nature's power. The gem at its heart acts both as amplifier and reservoir. Magic can be poured into it and then released in a single, enormous surge. That did not mean a staff was simply superior to a wand. A wand made spellcasting quick and precise, like a narrow pipe that lets you control the flow. A staff was more like a floodgate. When opened, the torrent is overwhelming but harder to temper. Staff magic required time and strength of spirit. It was not ideal for sudden, nimble use. Wands were for precision and repeated use. Staffs were for great, concentrated power. Congratulations, Dewey. With this staff, you're truly a black-robed wizard, Gandalf said with a chuckle. Dewey leaned on the staff, expression full of gratitude. Thank you, Gandalf, and thank you to Lady Galadriel and the elven craftsmen. Without your gifts and help, I'd never have such a fine staff. Gandalf waved the thanks away. You made wands for me, I made a staff for you. No need for ceremony. But you must have noticed its limits, Gandalf continued. How does it feel when you use it? Dewey frowned slightly. It's harder to control. A single spell is fine, but sustaining magic through it exhausts me mentally. Gandalf nodded. A staff lets a wizard speak to the forces of nature, but that requires a strong inner life. No matter how powerful an individual is, they cannot match the whole of the world. To reach out and shape natural power, you must have a strong spirit, a strong soul. Dewey blinked. That touched a subject he'd barely been taught. In the wizarding world, soul magic was taboo. The unforgivable curses themselves, Avada Kedavra, Crucio, Imperio, all dealt with the soul, and any inquiry into the soul's nature led straight to Azkaban. Gandalf, it seemed, trusted him enough to speak plainly. You must understand, Gandalf said, the soul is the foundation. A strong soul perceives the world, influences matter, and communes with nature. Ancient elves like Lady Galadriel and Lord Elrond, through long lives of learning and tempering, have souls that are tempered and unbreakable. Even without a staff, they can perform magic far beyond most wizards. If you wish to gain more power and to control your staff better, you must strengthen your soul. How does one strengthen the soul? Dewey asked. He felt the question keenly. Elves gain strength slowly over lifetimes. He did not have that luxury. Gandalf smiled as if he had expected the question. There are many ways, he said. One is the elven way, to accumulate wisdom and knowledge over long ages. It is the simplest and most reliable, but it takes time you may not have. Dewey dismissed that instantly. He could not wait millennia to temper his soul. Another is trial by suffering, Gandalf went on. Hardships, especially life and death ordeals, can temper the spirit into indomitability. Lord Glorfindel, after he slew a Balrog and was reborn, gained a soul of great purity and power, comparable in some ways to a Maya. Dewey imagined that and recoiled. That path sounded perilous and capricious. Not everyone survives, and few are offered Glorfindel's fate. Gandalf seemed to read his reaction and smiled. The third is meditation. This is what I recommend for you. Meditation tempers spirit and will. It's not as swift as near-death trials, but it's far quicker than waiting centuries. Meditation? Dewey was surprised. You meditate too? He blurted. Gandalf was a Maya. His soul was already vast. Why would he need meditation? Meditation is not the exclusive domain of any one being, Gandalf said quietly. Even the Valar meditate, only the depth differs. Very well. How do I meditate? Dewey asked. Gandalf's smile grew faintly amused. You already have a meditation method, and it's arguably better than the one I had in mind. You simply haven't recognized it. Dewey frowned, bewildered. I already have a method? Have you forgotten the music Tom Bombadil taught you? Gandalf asked. Music? Dewey's eyes widened. He had always thought of Bombadil's song as a way to lift spirits, to dispel the lingering effects of the dark arts, and as a bolster to his Patronus. He had never considered it a meditation technique. Gandalf nodded. There are many forms of meditation: contemplation, prayer, chanting, recitation, walking. The song Bombadil taught you is a very effective meditative practice. You simply never explored it deeply. Chapter 128, Return to Weathertop. After Gandalf's words, Dewey felt a little embarrassed. He had been penny-wise and pound-foolish, picking up sesame seeds and dropping watermelons. He had never realized that the music magic he used to dispel gloom was actually a method of soul cultivation. It was like finding a treasure and not knowing its worth. Now that he understood, he wouldn't neglect it again and asked Gandalf how to meditate with music. Gandalf was generous. He taught Dewey the music meditation and another method of his own. Burning certain herbs, sage, cedar, sandalwood, mugwort, and using their aroma to relax body and mind and enter a mindless meditative state. In this practice, the scent became an anchor that let him sink into deep meditation amid the curling smoke. Gandalf had developed it himself. He often smoked pipeweed, slipping into that mindless state to find inspiration and wisdom. He told Dewey that the two methods could be combined for better results. Dewey was grateful. He spent over a week carving a faster flying broomstick from melon tree wood, and presented it to Gandalf. It could not repay what Gandalf had given him, but it was the best gift he could offer. Gandalf was pleased and immediately took to the air on the broom, passing over Lorien until the elves below glanced up in curiosity. One day, Dewey sought out Galadriel. He took from his pack the white tree fruit Thranduil had given him. "Lady Galadriel, do you know any way to make this white tree seed sprout?" A trace of interest lit her eyes as she took the fruit and turned it in her hand. "I did not expect you to hold a descendant of Nimloth. I thought, apart from the one Isildur preserved, the white tree of Numenor had long perished." "It was given me by Thranduil," Dewey explained. "He once traveled to Numenor and picked it." Galadriel smiled gently and drifted across the grass, her moon-white robes barely stirring the blades. Dewey followed. She came to the silver basin in the garden and submerged the fruit in the running water. "The fruit is ancient and has been thirsty a long while. Let it soak here for 3 days. When it has absorbed enough water, bring it to me. Then place it where it will receive Arundel's light and bury it in uncontaminated earth. It will then be able to sprout." "Thank you, lady," Dewey said, his eyes bright. He had not expected such a ready solution, nor that the Arundel light she had given him would be useful in this way. 3 days passed quickly. Dewey retrieved the fruit, now heavy with water, and placed it to absorb Arendel's light. He planned to plant it on Weathertop when he returned. Though this was only a 4th-generation white tree, it still possessed remarkable magic. Galadriel told him how the white tree was bound to nature. Its growth drew the land toward health and abundance, encouraged plants and animals, and drove back shadow. Where its roots spread, dark magic weakened. Even tainted land could be purified. Sap from its leaves or fruit could heal wounds and soothe minds eroded by darkness. It could counter enchantments and poisons. For these reasons, dark powers had always coveted the white tree. Sauron had worked to deceive Númenóreans into cutting Nimloth down, and later burned Gondor's first white tree after capturing Minas Ithil. After almost 2 months in Lorien, Dewey and the others prepared to depart. Galadriel presented Legolas with a longbow of melon heartwood whose string was braided with a strand of her hair, promising unerring accuracy. She gave Bilbo a small, gray wooden box containing soil from her garden to make his own plot flourish. Bilbo had asked for it, and pressed a blessing kiss to the old hobbit's brow that purified him of the ring's lingering influence. When it was Dewey's turn, he asked for a melon tree seed to plant beside the white tree fruit, and thus create a simple pair of trees to grace Weathertop. Galadriel liked the idea and granted the seed, along with a jar of water from the silver basin to help the melon take root. This time they did not mount dragons. Instead, they all used the fireplaces and flue powder to go to Rivendell. Smaug, now capable of flight, set off on his own to cross the misty mountains and catch up. Except for Galadriel and Celeborn, who remained in Lorien, everyone arrived in Rivendell by fire. With the fireplaces of Lorien and Rivendell linked, Arwen could travel freely between her father's house and her grandparents' home. Teleporting so many people had depleted Dewey's flue powder, so he planned a new batch. The main ingredient, moonstone, was prized by elves for its gentle, lunar glow. Elrond sent him a quantity of beautiful moonstones, but Dewey refused. They were far too fine for making melted flue powder. Seeing this, Elrond instead sent him ordinary moonstone ore in abundance. Dewey set to work in Rivendell. He also left the fledgling Thorondor in Elrond's care. While Dewey worked, Arwen and Aragorn finally met, though not as adults. In this timeline, Arwen met Aragorn as an 11-year-old. There was no romance yet. As Elrond's foster daughter, she treated him as a younger brother. Dewey gathered the rest of the materials. He used giant spider silk, which proved superior to common spider silk, and for snake fangs, he could find none. He went to the troll forest just outside Rivendell. Speaking Parseltongue, he summoned a brood of venomous snakes and collected a full pouch of fangs. The snakes were left wailing. Each had lost a venomous fang and could not even open their mouths properly without fear of scorn. After half a month in Rivendell, Dewey produced a full barrel of flue powder, enough to last long. He gave Elrond a large bottle in thanks. The fledgling Thorondor's congenital ailment had been cured. With proper care, it would one day soar with the great eagles. Smaug, meanwhile, was already outside Rivendell, causing trouble for the trolls in the troll forest. When farewells were exchanged, Dewey, Gandalf, Bilbo, and Legolas stepped into the fireplace at Rivendell and arrived at Weathertop. Smaug continued his arduous flight and would meet them later. The green flames burned in the Amonsul hearth. The old tower, long uninhabited, finally had visitors again. They emerged in a cloud of soot and ash. "Tui! Tui! Tui!" They spat and laughed as they wiped themselves clean. Dewey cast a quick charm, and they were presentable. Dewey surveyed the empty rooms and sighed, finally back. He waved his hand and began to clear the dust that had gathered over the years. Legolas craned his head to look at the tower. "This is Amonsul? I thought it was destroyed by the Witch King's army 1,000 years ago. How did you do this, Dewey?" Gandalf settled on a sofa with a chuckle. "It is Dewey's magic. You should have seen how he restored Amonsul in a few breaths. It was a spectacle." Bilbo, completely at ease, padded outside to admire the view. Dewey set to work on the interior. "Whirlwind sweep," he called. A small tornado formed inside, spinning up from the first-floor stair and sweeping dust up and through each level, moving automatically until it exited the highest observatory and dissipated into the air. Legolas watched, astonished and delighted. "Dewey, your magic is amazing." Dewey smiled. "Want to learn? I'll teach you." "But from now on," Legolas said, eyes bright with mischief, "the tower cleaning will be your responsibility." "No problem," Legolas replied without hesitation. It was a small price to pay for learning Dewey's tricks. Just then, Bilbo burst back in, breathless with excitement. "Dewey, come outside! Come see!" "What is it, Bilbo?" Dewey asked, curious. Gandalf and Legolas looked up too. Bilbo grinned. "I saw a village down the mountain, right beside the Water of Weeping." Chapter 129, Subjects. Dewey stared in astonishment when Bilbo told him a village had sprung up at the foot of Weathertop. He remembered the area as bleak and empty. He went out at once with Bilbo, Gandalf and Legolas following close behind. From the hilltop, the view was the same as ever. Weathertop's summit dominating the plain, the broad marsh of the Water of Weeping below, and the east-west road cutting across the land. But between the marsh and the road, near the water, smoke curled into the sky, and the shapes of houses and people could be made out. Standing on the summit and looking down, Dewey's head filled with questions. When had these people come here? Gandalf smiled at first, then reminded him, "Have you forgotten the villagers we rescued in the troll forest?" Dewey remembered at once, but he was puzzled. He had given a share of the troll's treasure to those people. It was enough for them to live comfortably anywhere. The Lonely Lands lay between the troll forest and Weathertop, a harsh crossing, full of beasts, bandits, and the risk of orcs. Even if they had made the journey, there was no provision here for food or shelter. Settling would mean starting from scratch. In Dewey's mind, they should have continued west to Bree, or followed the Grey Flood below the last great bridge into the human realms to the south. Why build near Weathertop? He decided to find out. "Let us go down and meet our new neighbors," he said. They did not take to the air on broomsticks. They walked slowly down the overgrown, thorny path. Dewey made a mental note to have a proper road built. It would look shabby if his own residence could not be reached by anything better than a bramble-choked track. At the foot of the hill lay the Water of Weeping, a vast swamp stretching from the Weathertop slopes toward Bree. Dewey looked at the marsh and began to think of plans. He imagined hiring men to drain it and turn the basin into a proper lake, like the Black Lake at Hogwarts. Then he could cross by boat or a high bridge and make Weathertop into a defensible stronghold. Bypassing the worst of the marsh, they came to the village. The sight of strangers put the people on alert, but when the villagers saw Dewey, Gandalf and the others descending from Weathertop, their vigilance turned quickly to surprise and curiosity. A young man in simple linen clothes pushed forward from the crowd and, face bright with excitement, cried, "Wizard Dewey, you've returned." Dewey looked at him and memories clicked into place. "You are, Edward?" The young man nodded, both proud and relieved. "It's me, Wizard Dewey. You're back." Dewey asked the question he had come to ask. "Why are you here? How did this village come to be?" "After you and Wizard Gandalf saved us and gave us money," Edward said eagerly, "most of us tried to travel west along the road to settle in your lands. The journey was long. We came upon orcs and thought we were done for." His face still showed the memory of fear. Duer and Gandalf exchanged frowns. Orcs so near the roads? What happened then? Duer asked. We met a band of rangers, Edward went on. They slew the orcs and, when they heard we had been rescued by you and Wizard Gandalf, 2 rangers escorted us all the way here. The leader said he knew you. His name was Alpha. Duer's surprise deepened. He had not expected the Dunedain to be involved. At Edward's eager invitation, Duer and his 3 companions were led into the settlement. Among the people he recognized, many they had rescued before. A few faces were new. Edward explained that those newcomers were folk from nearby who had heard of the black-robed wizard Duer and had come to seek sanctuary, hoping for Duer's protection. Across Eriador, the name of the black-robed wizard had already spread. In these troubled times, if people had no protector, they were prey, robbed by bandits, exploited by the powerful, or hunted by orcs, trolls, and worse. Finding a lord who could offer safety, especially a compassionate one, was a hope few could resist. Duer's deeds had become like stories in the wild, helping hobbits against rampaging trees, driving out the Barrow-wights, freeing villagers from trolls. Many now saw in him a figure of mercy and strength. Edward said these refugees were only the first wave. More would come. Already there were over 300 people in the village. If that continued, the hamlet would need to grow into a town. All the villagers gathered as Duer stepped into the square. Those he had saved before looked at him with joyful surprise and relief. They had traveled great distances to place themselves under his protection, and his long absence had left them anxious. The newcomers watched from afar, respectful and nervous, hardly daring to approach lest Duer refuse them. Duer asked, "Who is handling the village now? Who is chief?" A tall, thin, middle-aged man stepped forward. "Lord Duer, I am Luke. The villagers chose me to manage things for the time being, but the true head should be appointed by you." Duer studied him. The man seemed deferential, yet steady. "You're not one of the people we rescued. Where did you come from?" Luke bowed. "My lord, I used to live in Bree." That surprised Duer. Bree, at the crossroads of the east-west and north-south roads, was a bustling town. Why would a man leave Bree to set up here? Luke did not try to hide the truth. "I am the son of the former mayor of Bree. I fell out with the present mayor, and when I heard you were founding a hold here, I came seeking your protection." Duer's memory supplied the rest. It was a quarrel born of a change in power. He had no appetite for meddling in Bree's politics. Luke, however, seemed capable. He had quickly won the villagers' trust, organized them to build houses, and begun trading with passing merchants. Such a man would do well anywhere. Since Luke had no evident designs against him and had the villagers' approval, Duer nodded. "If the people approve, you may continue as village chief and manage the affairs of the place." Relief and joy showed on Luke's face. He had kept his composure before, but uncertain of Duer's opinion, he had been anxious. He fell to his knees and, voice solemn, made a vow. "I, Luke Thompson, in the name of the gods, swear allegiance to the great lord of Amon-Sul, the Tree Feller, the White Bane, the Troll Slayer, the Orc Nemesis, Lord Duer." At once the rest of the villagers dropped to their knees as well, swearing fealty to Duer, offering themselves as his subjects and accepting his rule. Duer was taken aback by the suddenness of it. He waved his hand. "You need not swear fealty. You may live here if you wish. I will guarantee that you shall not be harmed." The villagers froze, anxious and uncertain. Gandalf looked at them, and then at Duer, and said quietly, "Duer, accept their oath. Only as your subjects can they be sure of safety here." Duer, looking at the eager, expectant faces, felt a sudden headache. He had already offered them shelter and pledged protection. Why did they need to become his subjects to feel secure? Yet he saw how much comfort it gave them. With a sigh, he nodded and accepted their allegiance. At once the villagers rejoiced, as if they had found a home at last. They could now call Duer "my lord," and know a lord stood between them and the dangers of the world. Gandalf, Bilbo, and Legolas, who had watched the scene unfold, stepped forward to congratulate him. "Congratulations, Duer. You have subjects now," Gandalf said with a laugh. "Shall we all begin calling you my lord from now on?" Bilbo chimed in, delighted at the idea of a friend who was a lord. Legolas remained quiet but smiled broadly. Chapter 131, Resettlement. Luke, appointed the village's first chief by Dewey, took the opportunity to ask, "My lord, our village doesn't have an official name. May I ask you to name it?" The other villagers watched Dewey expectantly. He did not refuse. After a moment's thought, he said, "Then we shall call it Hogsmeade Village." He had already changed Amonsul to Hogwarts. Since this village lay close to Hogwarts, a corresponding name made sense. And so Hogsmeade Village was born, a name that would one day be famous across Eriador and beyond. Having accepted these people, Dewey could not appear indifferent. With a single wave of his wand, stones rose and stacked themselves, timber joined and erected, and houses assembled automatically. Under the villagers' stunned, awed gazes, buildings sprang up, and a high, thick stone wall formed around the settlement. Before long, a village that looked like a small fortress stood before them. Dewey stopped casting, nodded with quiet satisfaction, and left the work at that. It was both a display of power and a welcome gift, but he would not repeat it. A little help earned gratitude. Too much bred dependence. He did not want his people to grow used to relying on magic for everything. He was responsible for their protection, not for doing all their work for them. No sooner had the villagers recovered from their shock than a mighty roar split the air. Everyone looked up. A black speck in the sky grew rapidly larger, and confusion quickly turned to terror. "Dragon! A dragon!" the villagers cried, faces drained of color. Many had only heard of dragons in tales. To see one in person sent them into a panic. "Quick, take cover!" Luke shouted, more frightened than he let on. He glanced at Dewey and the others, who were standing calmly, looking up. Trying to hold himself together, he called, "My lord, the dragon is coming. We should hide." Dewey exchanged a look with Gandalf, and with a voice that carried to every ear without raising it, said, "No need. That dragon is my mount. It won't harm you." The villagers found that hard to believe. It was a dragon, after all, but they did not have long to wait. The dragon swooped down, wings churning a fierce wind, and settled outside the village. The villagers watched, pale and trembling. The dragon complained to Dewey in a loud, grumpy voice. "Master, you teleported back without a care, but I had to fly all the way from the Trollshaws without stopping. My stomach's growling." Then his eyes slid over the cowering villagers. A mischievous gleam flashed across his face. "Are these the little snacks you've prepared for me, master?" The villagers gasped. Terror deepened. Dewey snapped, "Shut up. If you frighten them again, I'll confiscate all your treasures and make you sleep on the floor." "And these are my people. Don't be rude. Ah, they're the master's people." The dragon's tone shifted instantly. He forced on a smile and boomed to the villagers. "I am Smaug, the Golden, Lord of Wealth. If ever you face an enemy you cannot defeat, call me. I'll burn and plunder whatever stands in your way." Even smiling, Smaug's fierce head made the villagers tremble. Their eyes kept flicking back to Dewey. Dewey felt his teeth ache with annoyance. Of course the dragon would not behave itself. How was he supposed to cultivate a noble image if his mount kept talking about burning and looting? If word of that got out, folk might think Weathertop a bandit's den. Dewey decided he could not linger here. He had to settle this dragon first. After a few words to the villagers, the group boarded Smaug and left. They watched the dragon fly toward Weathertop, and though Dewey fretted about his reputation, the villagers' fear swiftly turned to awe. Their lord owned a dragon. That meant power. No one would dare cross them now. They could proudly call their lord the Dragon Lord. Smaug set them down at Weathertop. Dewey had already planned the dragon's lodging. He had ridden a broom to the cliff behind the tower, used an exploding charm to blast a great opening, and dug inward until he reached a chamber beneath the tower that connected to the cellar on the tower's first underground level. The cellar's space, enlarged with an undetectable extension charm, would be large enough for Smaug. The dragon could enter through the cliffside cavity. Smaug peered into the empty cellar and looked at Dewey with greedy anticipation. "Master, pour out all the treasure. I can't sleep without a bed of gold." Dewey took the hint and opened a pouch containing a portion of the Lonely Mountain hoard. He rose on his broom and tipped it open. A golden river poured out and filled the cellar. Smaug's eyes went green. He dove into the cascade of gold and silver, bathing himself in it, the coins chiming like a kind of music. Dewey, watching the dragon revel, wondered what Morgoth had in mind when making dragons so obsessed with treasure. Even 1/10 of the Lonely Mountain's wealth, formed a glittering pile that filled the cellar. Smog still sniffed at Dewey hungrily. "You're carrying gold, Master. Don't hide it. Bring it out." Dewey's mouth twitched. He emptied the spoils taken from Goblin Town onto the pile. Smog's gaze didn't waver. "More! You have more! Bring it! I'll keep it safe for you." So Dewey poured out the treasures taken from the Trollshaws and the Barrow Downs until he had nothing left on him. Only then did Smog relax, a contented groan rumbling as he settled on his hoard. "Go on, Master. Don't worry. I'll watch these treasures and make sure not a coin goes missing." Not wanting to argue with the dragon, Dewey left the cellar and shut the heavy door. With his wand, he etched a warning on it. "Sleeping dragon, do not disturb." From the tower's lookout, Dewey returned a moment later with other plans. In the central stone platform sat a depression, once the place where Arnor's palantir had been set. He took out his palantir and placed it in that hollow, then set beside it the crystal vial holding the light of Arendelle. The idea was simple. If Sauron tried to spy through the stone, the light would blind him. Then Dewey released the great bird's nest he had carried and placed the young eagle Thorondor on the opposite side of the lookout. Great eagles loved high places. Thorondor immediately spread his wings and let out a clear, ringing cry, pleased with his new home. Dewey stroked the chick with a soft smile. "This will be your new home. When you're grown, you can soar the skies by day and come back here to rest at night. Do you like it?" The young eagle, who understood human speech, nuzzled him and chirped happily. Dewey fed him some dried meat. Elrond had already tended the bird's injuries. With care, it would grow as other great eagles did. Dewey looked forward to the day the bird would take full wing. On the middle floor, Dewey locked the 2 giant spiders he had captured behind a magically fortified iron door. "I'm beginning to feel like I'm opening a zoo," he muttered. Indeed, a dragon in the cellar, a young eagle in the lookout, and 2 giant spiders caged in the middle. It did feel rather zoo-like. Pushing the thought aside, Dewey found an open, sunlit patch outside the tower and began to prepare the ground. He loosened the soil and then took from his pocket 2 seeds, 1 gold, 1 silver. The seeds of the holy white tree and the melon tree. The seed of the holy white tree had been soaked for 3 days in Galadriel's silver basin and then bathed in the light of Arendelle. It was plump and gleaming, faintly haloed by that light. The white tree had been created by Yavanna in imitation of Telperion, one of the 2 trees of Valinor. It did not glow on its own, but the light of Arendelle, itself drawn from the Silmaril worn by Arendelle and ultimately from the 2 trees, would be a powerful tonic for it. Galadriel had asked Dewey to bathe the seed in that light for good reason. Dewey buried the holy white tree's seed and watered it with water from the bottle Galadriel had given him, water that bore the power of Narya. The water was extraordinary and would help the seed break its shell and sprout. About 100 meters away, he planted the melon tree's seed and watered it too. The melon would grow tall enough to support platforms and tree houses, so he had given them distance so they would not crowd each other. Finally, Dewey wove a series of shielding and protective charms around each planting spot to deter any disturbance. Now all that remained was to wait for the seeds to push up through the soil. He pictured in time 2 towering trees, 1 gold, 1 silver, rising on Weathertop and transforming the place's appearance. Chapter 132. Herbs arrive inside Amonsul's 7th-story tower. Dewar had turned the space into a meditation room. Gandalf had carved runes into the floor and the surrounding walls, weaving calming, stabilizing magic into the stones. Dewar, meanwhile, had opened up 2 tall fireplaces, wide and high enough for him to step inside, and set to work on something else entirely. He inscribed runes on the hearths, planted a magical gem at each core, and, staff in hand, poured his power into them while chanting a long, complex spell. As he channeled more and more energy and felt the effort beginning to drain him, a small silver-blue flame sprang to life. It was tiny, but it seemed indestructible, burning in midair without fuel, neither growing nor waning. Dewar smiled at the sight. Gandalf noticed and walked over, surprised. "What sort of fire is that?" he asked. "This is Gubraith's cell," Dewar answered, "the eternal flame." It was a sophisticated, ancient magic, one only a few wizards could ever produce. Dewar had managed only a small instance with the help of his staff's amplifying power. Gubraith's cell could burn forever without fuel and was extremely stable, far less wild and destructive than fiendfire. In some places, it had provided continual light in great halls and gardens from the time of the founders until the age of Harry Potter. Dumbledore had once given a Gubraith cell to Hagrid for the Giants, hoping to sway them against Voldemort, and the Giants had been very taken with it. Gandalf nodded, impressed. The eternal flame? Truly remarkable. Let me help. A brilliant ruby glow flared at his fingertip, and a strong force flowed into the small flame. As if doused with a catalyst, the silver-blue flicker roared into a tall, steady pillar of fire. The room brightened instantly and grew warmer. Dewar stared as the Gubraith cell rose higher than he was, glancing enviously at the ring of fire on Gandalf's hand. What he had produced alone was only a modest spark. Gandalf had expanded it effortlessly. They repeated the process at the second hearth. With 2 towering Gubraith cell flames burning, the meditation room became brilliantly lit and comfortably warm. Besides burning eternally, Gubraith cell absorbed and concentrated ambient magic, so the aura in the room thickened. Dewar felt the shift immediately. Magical energy pooled and swelled around them. Meditating or practicing spells in such a place would be far more effective. "Thank you, Gandalf," Dewar said. "Without the other wizard's aid, the flames would never have reached this scale." Gandalf smiled. "When you meditate, try casting the meditation herbs into the Gubraith cell. The effect should be stronger still." Dewar nodded, thoughtful. Then a green flame suddenly flickered in the flue hearth outside, and Bilbo's head emerged. "Dewar, Luke, the mayor of Hogsmeade, is here with some guests," Bilbo called through the fire. Guests? Dewar's curiosity was piqued. He and Gandalf used flue powder and steppered through to the first-floor hearth. Amon Sul's tower climbed over 1,000 feet and had 60 floors. Climbing was onerous, so Dewar had connected a local flue network, 1 fireplace per floor, linked with a jar of flue powder by each hearth. He'd made a whole barrel of the stuff. Rivendell agreed to send Moonstone in return, and with that small trade, he'd never hesitate to use flue powder again. On the first floor, Dewar was met by Mayor Luke and a tall, familiar face. "Lord Dewar," Luke began, standing, an old courtesy. Dewar waved him off. When he saw the tall man beside Luke, his smile widened. "Alpha, what a surprise! I didn't expect you." Alpha, a Dunedain Dewar, had met once at the Prancing Pony during the Lonely Mountain expedition, bowed with grave respect. "Wizard Dewar, your deeds at the Lonely Mountain are known even west of the Misty Mountains," he said. "The elves sing of your bravery, bards put your name to song. Your actions at the 5 armies turned the tide." Dewar shook his head modestly. "That's too kind. I had help, Gandalf, the dwarves, the elves. I was not alone." He then asked the reason for Alpha's visit. Alpha did not press the praise further, but explained his purpose plainly. "The herbs you asked us to collect, most of them are gathered. You were away when we tried to deliver them, so we waited until we heard you'd returned." Dewar's eyes lit. He had traded the ancient sword from the Barrow Downs to Alpha and asked the Dunedain to gather rare plants. It had been almost a year. If Alpha hadn't come today, Dewar might have forgotten altogether. "You brought them? Where are they?" "Outside," Alpha said. "There's a good deal. They're in carts. We thought you'd want to inspect them before bringing them in." "A good deal?" Dewar was even more eager. "Show me." Outside, a small company of Dunedain stood aside while several large carts were unloaded. The carts were heaped with boxes and crates. Herbs of every description were packed and labeled. Many of the plants were still living, potted in soil, with leaves and flowers intact. Dewar hurried forward and peered into the nearest crate. "Is this king's grass? Athelas?" he asked, astonished. One box was stuffed with what looked like 100 clumps of the healing plant. King's grass had strict growing conditions and was slow to root. Dewar had only ever seen a few specimens in Lorien and always admired its healing power from afar. Alpha nodded. "It's difficult to transplant. We brought what we could as living plants." Dewar could hardly have been more delighted. Athelas healed wounds, slowed poisons, and could even ward against evil. He had long envied the patches in Galadriel's garden, but had never dared ask. Now, so much at once made his heart sing, though he winced at the sight of some of the plants, a little wilted from travel. He must transplant them carefully, he thought. He moved along to the next crate. Dozens of flowers nodded in their pots. some golden yellow and star-shaped, others the same form but pure white. Alpha explained, "The golden ones are Eleanor, the white ones are Nifredil. They're varieties of the same species. One blooms by day, the other at night. They usually only grow where the elves dwell." Dwyer had seen both in Lorien and had not expected the Dunedain to find them. Alpha pointed out Cymbelmen next, small white rosette flowers common on Rohan's burial mounds, with 8 petals and hardy enough to bloom year-round. Then there were the fabled 8-colored blossoms said to be the Entwives' flowers, supposedly from the Old Forest. 8 hues: red, orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue, purple, and white, each arising where an Entwife vanished. Alpha told the old story in a low voice. The Entwives, the female companions of the treefolk, had disappeared long ago into the Old Forest. The Ents were left as males, and the treefolk never truly recovered their old way of life. Some said the horns of the Old Forest were degenerate relatives of the Ents. Dwyer listened with a pang of regret that he'd never found such flowers in his own travels through the Old Forest, and with fresh wonder at how these Dunedain had managed to procure them. Other crates held more familiar and rare plants. The blood-red blooms of Saragon, detoxifying nightshade, delicate seafoam flowers that grew by coastal reefs, sun lilies from the gardens of Ithilien, and saxifrage clinging to rocky cliff faces. Each specimen had been carefully packed and labeled. The Dunedain had taken pains to keep them alive and whole. Dwyer walked among the crates, fingertips brushing leaves and petals, his mind already racing through where each plant would be best placed in the tower and the garden. With such a bounty of herbs, his meditations and his research could advance far more quickly. He swallowed a laugh of delight and turned to Alpha and Luke. "You've done far more than I expected. Come inside. We'll find space to transplant these and plan how best to care for them." Alpha inclined his head. Around them, the Dunedain settled the last of the boxes and took their ease in the sun, while Dwyer hurried back inside with Gandalf to make room beneath the Gubraith cell flames. The eternal fire's warmth and the influx of rare herbs together promised a season of growth and discovery for Amon Sul. Chapter 132, Meditation. Surrounded by so many living magical herbs and flowers, Dwyer was momentarily dazzled. Alpha noticed the joy on his face, but still reminded him seriously, "Wizard Dwyer, although these are living specimens, each requires different growing conditions. Transplanting them successfully will not be easy." Saying it's not easy is an understatement, Dwyer thought. The herbs had come from all corners of the world. Some liked sun, some shade, and the soils varied. It would be a miracle if they could all survive together. Still, he had asked for living plants, and the Dunedain had done their best to bring him specimens. They had no expectation they would live. Dwyer understood Alpha's warning, but he didn't care. With magic at his disposal, he was confident he could make them thrive. "Don't worry," he said with a smile. "Since they've been brought here, there's a way to keep them alive. But I'll need you all to tell me the specific growing conditions for each plant, soil type, climate, temperature, everything." Alpha didn't fully understand, but he agreed. Dwyer then opened a spatial pouch and tucked away the large pile of wooden boxes filled with plants and soil. The Dunedain who watched this for the first time were dumbfounded. They followed Dwyer into the tower as he led them to a room on the 6th floor. With a flick of his wand, he cast the undetectable extension charm, and the cramped room began to stretch. The ceiling rose, the walls receded, and the space expanded continuously until it was as large as 2 or 3 football fields. Everyone stared around with wide eyes, tiny as ants in a giant's chamber. When the transformation finished, Dwyer turned to Alpha. "Alpha, what are the growing conditions for King's Grass? Tell me about the soil, the climate, everything." Alpha, still recovering from the shock, answered haltingly. Dwyer listened carefully, nodding. Then he waved his wand and rich soil materialized, filling the floor and forming a gentle hill. In the hollow of the hill, he summoned clear spring water to make a lake. He pointed his wand upward, and the ceiling became a blue sky with drifting clouds. A warm yellow sun shot from the wand tip to hang in that sky, giving appropriate light and heat. A cool breeze followed, causing ripples to spread across the lake. Dwyer planted watercress, yellow iris, and water lilies in the lake. On the slope above, he carefully transplanted the King's Grass, following Alpha's instructions. It liked moisture but not inundation, moderate temperatures, and plenty of sunlight. He had now recreated the ideal environment for the grass. Looking over the room, Dwyer was pleased. A few dozen seedlings dotted the hill now, but he envisioned them someday forming vast meadows. Those who watched were silent, faces full of astonishment. Even Gandalf, Bilbo, and others who had seen Dwyer's magic were utterly amazed. A young Dunedain rubbed his eyes as if not believing what he saw was real. Dwyer smiled and said, "Let's go. We'll move to the next room." Everyone followed him out, still dazed. As the last person left, the door closed, sealing the little world inside. Dwyer moved to the adjacent chamber and again expanded it with an undetectable extension charm. Consulting Alpha and the Dunedain, he changed that room into a dry grassland and planted the everlasting flowers from Rohan on the mounds. The scene felt so like Rohan that Gandalf could not help exclaiming. Room after room was transformed. Dense valleys, saline coastal flats, cliffs lashed by bitter winds, hills wreathed in snow and ice. Each chamber became its own natural environment. In a short time, everyone accompanied Dwyer through a compact tour of Middle-earth's various landscapes, and their wonder knew no bounds. "Dwyer, you encompass the natural environments of all Middle-earth," Gandalf praised, eyes bright with anticipation. "I can't wait to see these flowers in bloom. Please be sure to tell me when they do." "Of course," Dwyer replied. The environments were still rough. He would need to adjust them and eventually create full ecological cycles so the plants could truly thrive. Others asked to be invited when the gardens were in full bloom, and he agreed to all of them. By the end of the day, he had claimed the 6th floor as his herb garden in addition to the meditation room on the 7th. He intended to fill each floor gradually, potion rooms, a library, an alchemy lab, making Amon Sul truly his wizard's tower. As evening approached, the Dunedain who had brought the plants declined to stay. Their trading mission complete, they rode off. Luke, who remained, spoke up about the purpose of his visit. "My lord, the villagers wish to cultivate the land on the edge of the swamp and ask your permission." Dwyer had not expected that question and waved his hand. "You may discuss it with the villagers. You don't need my permission." Luke hesitated. "Lord Dwyer, how much tax will you collect?" "Tax? What tax?" Dwyer asked, surprised. "It's the tax to be paid to you. We are your people, and by ancient custom we owe a portion as a covenant for protection, head tax, inheritance, trade, land, house, and so on." Dwyer stared. He had never imagined he would one day be collecting taxes. He was about to refuse outright when he thought better of it and asked, "How much do others charge?" "I don't know everywhere, but Bree charges 10%, Luke answered. Dwyer considered, then said, "Collect 1%, but don't bring it to me. Use it entirely to maintain Hogsmeade Village." Luke looked as if he'd misheard, then joy and gratitude flooded his features. He bowed repeatedly. "Lord Dwyer, you are truly a benevolent lord. On behalf of the villagers, I thank you. Everyone will remember your kindness. Your grace is like sunlight into the furrows, nourishing our crops more than rain." Dwyer cut him off with a laugh. "All right, that will do. Go back and tell them." Luke was quick to take the hint and took his leave with a beaming face, eager to spread the news. He already imagined other, overtaxed folk flocking to Hogsmeade. He no longer saw himself merely as a village head. He dreamed of turning the village into a town, then a city, perhaps even a principality, and of being Dwyer's right-hand man, recorded forever in Hogsmeade's history. Dwyer had no idea of Luke's ambitions. After tending the white tree and planting the melon tree seeds as usual, Dwyer went to the meditation room on the 7th floor. He closed the door, set the room to do not disturb, and sat between two fireplaces burning with Gubraith cell fire. The floor and walls were carved with ancient elvish runes that helped calm and focus the mind. The only light came from the twin fires, whose flicker lent the chamber an air of mystery. The Gubraith cell flames brought such an abundance of ambient magic that the room felt no less charged than Rivendell or Lorien. Dwyer conjured a comfortable sofa and sat. He took from a pouch a handful of wide, golden melon tree leaves and tossed them into the fire. Before leaving for the herb garden, he had filled a space with fallen melon leaves. If scattered, they would have filled the entire meditation room. As the leaves burned in the Gubraith cell fire, they released a warm, sunny scent, fresh and comforting, like linens dried in the sun. He waved his wand, and the leaves drifted into the flames at measured intervals. Smoke rose, ethereal and lingering, not dispersing easily, but curling like long, thin ribbons. He breathed in the melon scent, leaned back, relaxed his body, and softly hummed the tune Tom Bombadil had taught him. His quiet song mingled with the magic-rich air, amplifying its effect. A joyful, childlike happiness welled up in him. One by one, his distracting thoughts vanished until only the music remained in his mind. Then even the music faded, and he settled into a thoughtless, empty awareness. He was neither asleep nor fully awake. His senses felt magnified. He could hear the crackle of burning leaves, the whispering of the air, his own breathing, the pulse of his blood, and even the subtle ebb and flow of magic within his body. Chapter 133. The 7-Year-Old Rooster. After an unknown length of time, Dewey finally came out of his meditation. He stretched, feeling as if he had just awakened from a blissful sleep. His whole body thrummed with renewed energy. To his surprise, he sensed a slight increase in his magic. He wasn't sure if it was imagination. If it was real, it would be a considerable gain. In the magical world, a wizard's power usually grows with age, especially between 11 or 12 and 17, when magic goes through a rapid surge. After reaching adulthood, it normally stabilizes. Only prodigies like Dumbledore or Voldemort keep improving noticeably through continual study. Dewey's path had been different. He had only awakened as a wizard after transmigrating, and he was already an adult. In the 2 years since his awakening, his power had climbed quickly, now rivaling that of elite aurors. Lately, however, that growth had seemed to level off. The increase he felt after this meditation made him think of the early days when his talent first surfaced. He meditated for several more days to be sure it wasn't a trick of his senses. Once he confirmed the gain, he let himself relax, quietly thrilled. He hadn't expected meditation to strengthen not only mind and spirit, but magic itself. Gandalf was not surprised. As he put it, soul, mind, and magic make a triangular whole. Magic is the outward expression of the mind. The mind reflects the soul. Meditation refines the mind awakens the soul, and a strengthened soul naturally increases one's magic. It was a neat explanation, and Dewey wanted to meditate constantly, but Gandalf warned that excess was harmful and exhausting. Under Gandalf's counsel, Dewey limited his sessions to a reasonable routine. There were other reasons to moderate practice. They were preparing to set out again. They still needed to go to the Old Forest to see whether Tom Bombadil would take the One Ring. And Bilbo was homesick. After a year away from the Shire, even the wonder of their journey paled beside the thought of Bag End. Before leaving Amon Sul, Dewey assigned care of the young eagle Thorondor to a youth named Edward from Hogsmeade. Thorondor, perched on the tower's peak, still required attention, and Edward had impressed Dewey during the rescue in the Troll Forest. While others stood stunned, Edward answered questions clearly and had been the first to greet them in Hogsmeade. He had traveled a long way to reach Dewey's territory, refusing to turn back even when hardships piled up. He had even spoken boldly to the Dunedain when frightened villagers feared bandits, and thereby secured their escort to Weathertop. Dewey liked his courage and sense of responsibility. Dewey handed Edward the duty with no qualms. Several important rooms in the tower had been magically sealed. No one could open them without Dewey's permission. He had taken the Palantir and the Light of Arundel down from the tower himself. The areas outside where the white tree and the melon tree seeds were planted had been enchanted against intrusion. Edward's sole task was to feed and tend Thorondor. To make sure food and care would be plentiful, Dewey even squeezed a bag of gold from Smaug, part payment, part provisioning, and gave it to Edward. Edward accepted it like a man given a sacred trust, promising to keep Thorondor well fed. Under Edward's watch, Dewey used flue powder with Gandalf, and Legolas to travel to the Prancing Pony Inn in Bree. Edward remained at the tower, and Dewey felt no unease about leaving him. The protections were sound and the charge in capable hands. The Prancing Pony's taproom was dim and quiet. A few travelers lingered over drinks while the innkeeper polished glasses. Without warning, the fireplace flared green, drawing startled looks. Buttercup, the innkeeper, froze for a moment, then recognized the sign, green flames. Before he could say anything, Gandalf stepped free of the hearth, coughing from the dust and smiling. "Good morning, Mr. Buttercup. Honestly, your fireplace needs cleaning," he said lightly, then offered a cheerful greeting to the patrons. "Good morning, everyone. I hope we haven't disturbed you." A second burst of green flames and Legolas came through, tall and lithe. His fine features and golden hair caught the lamplight. Someone near the bar whispered, "An elf!" and a ripple of astonishment passed through the room. The innkeeper's face lit up. The last elf his grandfather had told him about was a story, and to see a living elf in his lifetime felt like a small miracle. Even dust couldn't hide Legolas's noble air. Bilbo stepped out of the hearth next. The inn already employed 2 hobbits, so Bilbo drew only a mild reaction before he quickly moved aside to avoid the man crowding in behind him. With a final flare of green fire, Dewey emerged. The patrons' attention shifted now. Some at once recognized the name. Buttercup hurried out from behind the bar and bowed repeatedly, awe plain in his voice. "Lord Dewey, this establishment is honored. How may I serve you, my lord?" Weathertop and its master were known around Bree. Rumor had followed the tower's reappearance. The idea that the Lord of Amon Sul now ruled the folk at the foot of Weathertop made Buttercup cautious and solicitous. To be neighbor to a rising power was a relationship not to be neglected. Dewey had come prepared. He produced a pouch of gold coins and a scrap of parchment. "Mr. Buttercup, you receive travelers from all over. You hear news others don't. Help me collect the items listed on this paper. Get as many as you can." He pushed the parchment across the counter. On it were odd requests: bat spleens, tree snake skin, crocodile hearts, eel eyeballs, frog brains, pufferfish eyes, things a simple innkeeper wouldn't expect to find in a week. Then Dewey added, calmly but pointedly, "And please find me a rooster that's 7 years old." Buttercup blinked. A 7-year-old rooster was an uncommon thing. Most fowls were eaten or culled well before that age. But the bag of gold gleamed between them, and the innkeeper's practical side took over. He leaned forward, enthusiasm returning. "Leave it to me, Lord Dewey. Consider it done. These coins are a fine deposit. When I deliver everything you want, you'll be pleased with the rest of your payment." For Buttercup, information and goods flowed through Bree like river traffic. Rangers, merchants, dwarves, and minstrels all passed through. If anything could be found, his inn would hear a rumor of it. Dewey accepted the pledge, then purchased food for the road. With that settled, Gandalf, Bilbo, Legolas, and Dewey left Bree and continued their journey toward the Old Forest and whatever fate awaited the One Ring. 135. Goodbye, Bombadil. Chapter 134. Goodbye, Tom Bombadil. Heading west from Bree, Dewey had not yet finished setting up the Floo network, so teleporting by fireplace was not an option. They did not have to walk, however. Dewey and Gandalf each rode a flying broomstick. Dewey carried Bilbo, Gandalf carried Legolas. The 4 flew straight for the Old Forest. On the way they passed over the Barrow Downs. After the cleansing that had been done earlier, the evil that had haunted the Downs had been greatly reduced. It was still gloomy, but the Gujong corpse demons slept deeply. If no one disturbed them, they would pose no threat for decades. Dewey wanted to root them out completely, but as long as the Witch King of Angmar lived, the corpses would always be renewed. The Witch King, one of the Nazgul, a man corrupted by a ring, had been sustained in his ghostly state by the power of the One Ring and Sauron's dark arts. Dewey had slain a Nazgul at Dol Guldur, only to see it resurrected by Sauron. It was only when the One Ring was destroyed at the end of the War of the Ring that Sauron finally lost the power to sustain them. That defeat returned everything to the One Ring. Their present journey was to deal with that ring. They flew over the old trees and at last came above Tom Bombadil's house. Tom had already seen them and was waving wildly. When they landed on the hillside, he skipped down to meet them, his arms open in welcome. "Oh, my friends, welcome to Tom Bombadil's house," he sang, grinning broadly. "Hi, Tom, long time no see," Dewey replied, stepping forward. "Ah, Dewey, my friend, the easterly wind brought news of your victory. Do tell me of your journey." Tom laughed and gave Dewey an affectionate bear hug. Dewey smiled. He had long been grateful to Tom. The core of his first wand had come from Tom and Goldberry, and they had taught him the music magic that had aided his meditations and growth. He had always wanted to repay them, though Tom lacked for nothing. "Tom, I brought you a gift. I hope you like it," Dewey said, and produced a hollow ring set with a blue gem. Tom's eyes lit up when he took it. He slid it onto his right index finger, touched the ring, and instantly a splendid golden-brown staff appeared in his hand. Its head held a large ruby, grapevine carvings ran along its length, and the whole thing had a flowing, elven elegance. It reached just the right height for Tom. For me, Tom played with the staff like a delighted child. Dewey nodded. I had the elves make it, from the core of a melon tree from Lorien. Try tapping the ground with it. Tom tapped the staff to the earth. Wherever the staff touched, grass and flowers sprouted and bloomed. Tom's eyes widened in astonishment. He began to poke and tap all around, laughing as blossoms sprang up under his hand. Dewey's smile deepened. This staff was his first alchemical experiment. After finding the Book of Abraham, he had not stopped studying the alchemical lore within. In Lorien, he had used a leftover section of melon tree core, added a ruby from the hoard he had received at the Lonely Mountain, commissioned an elven craftsman to fashion the staff, and bound into it a simple flowers bloom charm. It was beautiful, and little else, but Tom loved it. Dewey had also enchanted the hollow ring with an undetectable extension charm. Internally, it opened onto a small extended space the size of a small room. Gandalf and the others had not known about the gifts beforehand. They were surprised and pleased. Tom led them home, and Bilbo and Legolas stood agape at the house, which had become a veritable conservatory of flowers. Goldberry emerged gracefully from among the water lily basins, wearing a silver gown that shimmered like drops of water. Her waist was girded with a golden belt. She was gentle as the willow and very beautiful. "Welcome. We have had no visitors since Dewey left last time," she said with a soft smile. Tom, proud as a child showing off, handed the staff to Goldberry. "Look, my new gift. It makes flowers bloom." Goldberry looked at Tom with affection and then thanked Dewey. "Thank you. This makes Tom very happy." Dewey beamed. He took out a second hollow ring, this one set with a green gem, and presented it to her. Goldberry's eyes filled with delight. She slipped it on, touched the hollow chamber, and a golden flower crown, woven by elves from melon tree blossoms that would never wither, appeared. She placed it on her head, smiling. "Thank you, Dewey. This is the finest gift I have ever received," she said. Gandalf, watching, murmured to Legolas and Bilbo with a wry note. Honestly, if Dewey had been even half as attentive when he was in Lorien and Rivendell, he might have made some progress with Arwen. Legolas and Bilbo both nodded. It was fortunate Dewey did not overhear. He had been entirely focused on strength and cultivation lately, and in any case had little chance of making a play for amid the watchful eyes of Celeborn, Galadriel, and Elrond's family. Tom and Goldberry set a generous table for their 4 guests. After they had eaten, Gandalf finally brought the reason for their visit into the open. "Tom," he said, solemn, "we have come because of a thing so dangerous none of us can safely hold it. We would ask you to take it into your keeping until a way can be found to destroy it." "What is it?" Tom asked, curious. Gandalf hesitated, then could not bring himself to say the word. He turned to Dewey. "You say it," he whispered. "I cannot." Dewey did not refuse. He had already used the Fidelius charm to keep this matter secret. He had been surprised Gandalf could acknowledge so much. "It is the One Ring," he said plainly. "We want you to keep it." By naming the ring, Dewey became secret keeper. Tom and Goldberry, upon hearing the truth, were bound by the charm's protections and could not speak of it further. Dewey had some doubts about whether such a charm could truly restrain Tom, but he trusted him. Bilbo took from his space pouch the small chest in which he kept the ring and set it on the table. Dewey tapped the chest with his wand. It opened on its own, and inside lay the golden ring. "Let me see this precious thing," Tom cried, curious. He reached out and picked it up. Bilbo and Legolas both stiffened. Gandalf tightened his hold on his pipe. Even though the ancient Tom Bombadil was thought to be beyond the ring's sway, concern lay in all their faces. Dewey, however, seemed calm and confident. The ring looked unexpectedly large in Tom's broad brown hand. Tom held it to his eye and laughed. Then, to the shock of Gandalf, Legolas, and Bilbo, Tom slipped the ring onto his little finger, and he did not vanish. It sat on his hand like an ordinary ring. Tom laughed again and tossed the ring up. For a moment it seemed to vanish and then reappear as if by magic. Bilbo's stomach tightened. He worried the ring had been switched. Tom put the ring back in the box, then picked it up once more. Under the watchful eyes of Gandalf and Dewey, Tom slipped it onto his finger again. This time, the instant the ring touched the hand, Bilbo disappeared from sight. Everyone stared at the empty chair, searching for his form. Tom, however, looked straight at the empty space with a sharp, amused light in his eyes. "Hey, Bilbo, Tom Bombadil is not so old his eyes cannot see," he called. "Take off your golden ring. Your hands were prettier without it." Bilbo, testing whether Tom could really see him, reluctantly took the ring back off. At once he reappeared before them, breathless and a little embarrassed. 136. Entrusted custody. This was the first time Bill had put on the One Ring in front of everyone. When he took it off and reappeared, they saw he had never left his seat. Gandalf looked at him with concern. Dewey asked anxiously, "Bill, are you all right?" They were mainly worried the ring might have affected him. Bill shook his head, looking clear-eyed, and tapped his forehead. "It tempted me, made me want to put it on and run away to hide, but then I felt a cool touch on my brow, and it calmed me." Dewey and Gandalf exchanged a look. They suspected Galadriel's blessed kiss on his forehead had taken effect. Both breathed a silent sigh of relief, yet inwardly resolved to keep Bill away from the ring in future. Galadriel's blessing could only hold the ring at bay for so long. Gandalf turned to Tom. "Tom, as you've seen, none of us are immune to the One Ring's pull. That's why we've come to entrust it to you. Will you take it?" Tom beamed and slapped his chest. Would Tom refuse a friend? Old Tom promises to keep the ring safe. Dewey's face grew uneasy. "Tom, will handling the ring harm Mrs. Goldberry?" Goldberry smiled and gently shook her head. There was no need to worry, she said. Tom, confident, patted his own chest again. "In Tom's domain, nothing can harm my Goldberry." With that, he picked up the ring and held it out. "Come on, try taking it," Dewey, Gandalf, and Legolas jumped back as if stung. The ring was a thing of dread. To touch it risked corruption. Gandalf nearly toppled his chair. Tom, triumphant like a prankster, grinned and shook the ring in his hand. "Don't be afraid. Try." The three of them hesitated. The power of the ring was terrifying. None of them wanted to take that chance. Yet Tom's expectant look persuaded Dewey. He drew a breath and reached out. Gandalf and Legolas watched with worry. When the ring settled into Dewey's palm, he exhaled. He felt the metals chill against his skin, and his heart still thumped. But something else surprised him. Held in his hand, the dangerous One Ring looked like an ordinary gold band. No seductive whisper, no tug at his mind. "Try it on," Tom urged, eyes bright. Dewey's fingers trembled. He'd almost been frightened off, but under Tom's steady gaze, he slid the ring onto his finger. Nothing happened. He did not turn invisible, as Bill had. He stared at Tom in disbelief. Tom puffed with pride, pleased as though he'd shown a small wonder to children. Gandalf, Legolas, and Bill each took the ring in turn. For all of them, it felt the same, an ordinary object, lifeless and powerless. The experience left them unsettled. This was the first time any of them had touched the ring. Dewey asked, "Tom, can you destroy it? If you can make it powerless, can you destroy it outright?" Tom shook his head. "I only keep its power from affecting me. That doesn't mean I can destroy it." They were not disappointed. Rendering the ring harmless was already extraordinary. They had not expected everything at once. After seeing Tom's ability, they entrusted the ring to him without further worry. Tom slipped it on his pinky. The small box that held the ring belonged to Bill, but Dewey and Gandalf decided Goldberry would be the safer steward. To prevent Tom's carefree nature from misplacing it, Goldberry smiled and agreed. With Tom and Goldberry's consent, Dewey linked their fireplace to the Floo network and gifted them a large bottle of Floo powder, inviting them to visit Weathertop whenever they liked. After spending one night at Tom's house, the group prepared to part ways the following day. Gandalf, however, would not be going all the way to the Shire with them. "Gandalf, aren't you coming with us to the Shire?" Bill asked. Gandalf patted Bill's shoulder. "No, Bill. Dewey and Legolas will escort you the rest of the way. I have other matters. I'm going south, worried about Mordor's situation, and I plan to speak with the steward of Gondor. I also mean to visit Isengard to inquire after an old acquaintance." Dewey frowned. "You plan to see Saruman? Isn't that dangerous, going alone?" Gandalf laughed softly. "Don't fret for me. I know Saruman has turned. I will not be rash. I only wish to scout and prepare." All right, be careful, Dewey said, hoping his journey would go smoothly. After farewells, Gandalf mounted his broom and flew south. Dewey gave his own flying broom to Legolas for the trip with Bill, while he took to the air in the shape of an owl, following them in that form. Passing through the old forest, he clipped a few horn branches and tucked them into his spatial pouch. He planned to make wands when he had time. They passed the old forest, crossed Buckland, and flew west until, in the afternoon, they reached Hobbiton. In owl form, Dewey landed first beside Bag End, then returned to human shape as his feet touched the ground. Legolas and Bill arrived close behind. Nearby hobbits stopped and stared, dumbfounded at the sight. Finally home, Bill murmured, looking at his familiar house with a flush of excitement. A year away felt like a lifetime. The garden had run wild in his absence. The mailbox bulged with letters. He opened the first and read, surprised. A letter from my cousin Drogo Baggins. He's getting married to a brandybuck. He looked pleased. I wish I'd known sooner. We could have stopped in Buckland to congratulate him. It's not too late, Dewey said. Tell me when you send the gift. I'll include one too. Bill cracked open the second envelope and his face changed. An auction notice? Auctioning Bag End? Why would they auction my house? Dewey and Legolas leaned in. The letter announced an auction of Bag End and its contents, inexplicably addressed to Bill's mailbox. Bill called down the path. Mr. Proudfoot! Mr. Proudfoot! A plump neighbor peered over his fence. Bill had changed during his adventures. The man hesitated at first, uncertain whether this was really his old neighbor. Mr. Bill, he said at last. It's me, Bill replied. Tell me, what's happened? Why is my house being auctioned? Mr. Proudfoot glanced at Dewey and Legolas, one an elf of graceful bearing, the other a wizard he'd seen before, and then spoke guiltily. You've been away a long time with no word. Folks assumed you were dead. They're dividing my property and putting my house up for sale? Bill's ears reddened with anger. He had been gone only about a year. They'd rushed to divide everything already. The neighbor looked even more uncomfortable. It was your cousin, Lobelia Sackville Baggins, he said. She declared you dead and pushed her son forward as heir. She organized a public auction. Hearing the name Lobelia Sackville Baggins made Bill even angrier. The woman had long coveted Bag End, especially if there were no heirs. Why did no one do anything sooner? Proudfoot lowered his voice and glanced at Dewey with a mix of fear and respect. We tried to open the door, sir, but Bag End's lock is strange. Whoever forced it began to grow long hair instantly. Shaving did no good. Folks were frightened and stayed away. The auction was called off. Bill stared at his overgrown garden and the pile of letters, stunned. The house had been left to rot, and yet, by some odd twist, it had protected itself. He felt a rush of unease and determination to put everything right. Chapter 136. A letter bill stood frozen for a moment at the news, then turned to Dewey with relief and gratitude. If Dewey hadn't left a small charm on the door lock when he departed, Bill was certain his house would have been cleaned out by the time he returned. With his means, he could have easily bought the entire Shire and still had coin to spare, but every item in Bag End had meaning. Once the reason for the charm was clear, Bill thanked the plump hobbit and led Dewey and Legolas into the yard. As he produced the key to unlock the door, he paused, looked at Dewey with wide eyes, and asked cautiously, Dewey, did you remove that curse on the lock? I don't suppose I'll sprout fur if I touch it, do I? Dewey's eyes twinkled with mischief and a touch of regret. Bill wasn't so easy to trick anymore. Dewey had no choice but to draw his wand, flick it across the lock, and remove the small spell. Bill breathed out in relief, glaring at his unruly friend with mock outrage. Childish, he muttered. Ignoring the scolding, he opened the door, invited Legolas inside, and warned him to watch his head. Dewey, acting as if this were his own home, moved straight to the fireplace and waved his hand. Clean as new, he declared, as a spell cleared away dust and soot. Bill had just set down a broom when Dewey's magic finished the job. I'll boil some tea, Bill said, and I'll go to the village market later. There's nothing left in the larder. I'll need to stock up. Seeing Legolas constantly stooping to avoid the low beams, Dewey asked Bill, Would you mind if I made your ceiling a bit higher? Bill, who had noticed Legolas's discomfort, looked apologetic. Hobbit holes are always a bit cramped for elves. Dewey, please, use your magic. With Bill's permission, Dewey waved his wand and enlarged the interior with an undetectable extension charm, chiefly increasing the height. Later, Bill went to the market to buy provisions, and Dewey and Legolas accompanied him. Legolas, having spent most of his life in Mirkwood, was fascinated by everything he saw on this outing. Word spread quickly through Hobbiton that Bill, whom many thought dead, was very much alive. The sight of him accompanied by an elf and a wizard made the gossip mill spin even faster. People wanted to know what had happened to him on his long travels and how he had come to bring an elf home. The next day, Bag End became unexpectedly lively. His cousin Otho Baggins and cousin-in-law Lobelia had come calling, the pair who had long coveted Bill's possessions. Bill was startled to see Lobelia's head covered in long, matted hair. She looked almost feral. When she spotted Bill, she threw herself into a show of piteous gratitude. "Cousin Bill, please save me. Look at me. All this hair. I'm ashamed. I can't face anyone," she wailed. "Please be merciful and remove this curse." Bill was taken aback, but he wasn't blind-hearted. He scorned her with a sniff. "If you hadn't been proclaiming my death and trying to have my house sold, would you have acted like this? And I have no magic. How could I remove your curse?" Lobelia did not give up. "We didn't mean harm. You were gone so long, and we feared the house would be taken. We only meant to see to it." She dropped into a pleading voice. "Cousin Bill, please ask that wizard to help me. I know he has power. I promise, if you lift the curse, I'll never bother you again." She nipped Otho to push him into corroborating her plea. He hurriedly promised the same. Bill hesitated. He disliked them, but he was not cruel, and a few months of humiliation seemed sufficient punishment. He turned to Dewey, asking quietly, "Dewey?" Dewey did not intend to meddle in family quarrels, but when asked, he stepped forward and waved his wand at Lobelia. "It's done." "Done?" Everyone peered at Lobelia, who showed no visible change, and then at Dewey with puzzled faces. "Did Dewey refuse to remove the curse? She will stop growing more hair," Dewey explained lightly. "As for the hair already there, she'll need to shave it off herself." Otho and Lobelia exchanged wary looks, but dared not press the point. They might be able to bully Bill, but faced with Dewey's keen stare, they felt something like fear. After the unpleasant pair left, the neighbors' curiosity drifted away. Bill turned back to Dewey. "So you really lifted the curse?" Dewey gave him a grin. "Did you think I'd trick them?" Bill shook his head quickly. "No, I just assumed you could make the hair vanish altogether." "I only promised to lift the curse," Dewey said, shrugging playfully. "I didn't promise to shave them." Bill chuckled inwardly at the image of Lobelia's imminent haircut and hoped she could find a competent barber. If someone botched it, she might have reason to hide her face for months to come. Dewey and Legolas stayed at Bag End for 3 days. When the time came to leave, with Bill looking on reluctantly, they simply stepped into the fireplace and apparated back through the flue connection to Weathertop. Dewey had no regrets. With Bag End and the Weathertop Tower now linked by the flue network, and with a supply of flue powder at hand, he could visit Bill whenever he pleased. On the first floor of the tower, Dewey emerged from the green flames. Legolas had arrived earlier and was exchanging pleasantries with Edward. Edward hurried forward when Dewey stepped out. "Lord Dewey, you're back," Dewey nodded. "Did anything happen while I was away?" "Nothing major, though a few more people came to Hogsmeade Village," Edward replied, then handed Dewey a letter. "But yesterday a message from Esgaroth arrived through the fireplace. It came via Bard sent with flue powder." "Bard of Esgaroth?" Dewey murmured, taking the envelope and opening it. The contents explained everything. The note was not exactly from Bard himself, but an invitation sent by the dwarves through Bard. Without a direct flue link to the Lonely Mountain, the dwarves had gone through Bard to reach Dewey. They had 2 reasons for needing him. First, concerning the giant dragon armor that Dane Ironfoot, Lord of the Iron Hills, had promised to forge for the dragon Smaug, a matter that required counsel. Second, the construction of a fortress on Weathertop. Thorin Oakenshield had promised, in exchange for Orcrist, to gather dwarf artisans to build a great castle for Dewey on Weathertop once the Lonely Mountain was reclaimed. Now that Thorin had indeed retaken the mountain and become king under the mountain, many of Durin's exiles had returned, and Thorin was ready to fulfill his pledge. Reading the letter, Dewey's face relaxed. He turned to Legolas. I'm going to Esgaroth. Would you like to come? Legolas shook his head. I should go back to Mirkwood for a while. Make sure you take plenty of flue powder, Dewey said. The woodland realm had fireplaces on the network too, so Legolas could travel conveniently if he was prepared. After a brief farewell, Dewey scooped up a handful of flue powder, tossed it into the green flames, and said, Esgaroth. He stepped through and vanished. Within moments, he appeared in the fireplace at Esgaroth. He paused, surprised by the changes. The living room of the house Bard had given him was redecorated and grander than he remembered. Stepping out into the street, Dewey found the town bustling. Rebuilt houses, shops lining the roads, hawkers calling, people everywhere. Dwarves mingled with humans in the market, bargaining and trading. The city that had once been razed by dragonfire was very much alive. Many residents spotted Dewey and greeted him with hats raised and respectful bows, which made the dwarves glance at him curiously. Dewey smiled and followed directions to Bard's residence. As the Lord's house, it was impressive, and guards stood at the gate. They recognized Dewey immediately and bowed. Wizard Dewar, one of them said with respect. Lord Bard said you may enter without announcement. Please this way. Dewey thanked him and followed into the newly built halls. Before he reached the main chamber, Bard himself hurried out to meet him, beaming. I did not expect you to come so soon, Dewey. Do come in. Dewey returned the smile. I only sent Bill back to the Shire and found your letter when I arrived at Weathertop. That's why I came. The changes here have surprised me, Dewey added. In just a few months, Esgaroth has come back to life. You have done well. Bard's manner had shifted. He carried himself with the authority and dignity of a true lord. Dewey noted the transformation with approval as Bard led him into the hall. Chapter 138. The Dwarven Craftsmen Arrive. Bard smiled at Dewey's appreciation. After exchanging a few pleasantries, they got down to business. The dwarves wanted to contact you but didn't have a direct line, so they entrusted the letter to me, Bard explained. They're in the city now. If you want to see them, I can send someone to fetch them. Dewey nodded. Then I'll trouble you. Soon an attendant of Bard's led a dwarf into the Lord's mansion. Lord Bard, Wizard Dewey. The newcomer bowed to both of them. Long time no see, Balin. How are you? Dewey greeted him warmly. As one of the elder dwarves, Balin had a steadiness and wisdom different from the younger kin, and Dewey had always liked him. Balin chuckled. I'm well. Erebor has been reclaimed. Durin's folk are returning. I don't have to worry about being buried in foreign lands anymore. He added, We've already prepared the craftsmen you requested. The journey from Erebor to Weathertop is too long and unsafe, so we came here to fetch you instead. And Lord Dane Ironfoot has forged the dragon armor and entrusted it to us for delivery, Balin continued. Dewey's eyes brightened. Already? Where is it? They're all in Erebor. You can take them now if you wish, Balin said. Shall we go? Dewey could hardly contain his impatience. After thanking Bard, he mounted a flying broomstick with Balin and set off for Erebor. Balin, riding a broomstick again, was visibly delighted. During the flight, he asked after Bilbo and was pleased to learn the hobbit had returned home. They reached Erebor's gates quickly. The entrance had been restored to its former grandeur. Armored dwarf guards posted at the gate, warriors patrolling the battlements. With dwarves streaming back from the Blue Mountains and other scattered clans, Erebor at last resembled a true dwarf kingdom. Led by Balin, Dewey entered without hindrance and made his way to the Great Hall. The hall was full now. No longer did Thorin sit with only a handful of kinsmen. With the return of so many, the court was bustling. Thorin Oakenshield sat upon his throne with his nephew Fili standing at his side. Long time no see, king under the mountain, Thorin Oakenshield, Dewey said, leaning on his staff. Thorin inclined his head. Wizard Dewey, it has been a long time. You look better than before. He instructed a herald, then turned to Dewey. I once promised to aid you in building a castle. I will fulfill that promise. I will send 1,000 dwarf craftsmen to accompany you until your castle is completed. He gestured toward Balin. My cousin Dane has forged the dragon armor and entrusted it to me to deliver to you. Balin will take you to it. Dewey was nearly speechless with gratitude. Thank you, Your Majesty Thorin, he said sincerely. With 1,000 craftsmen at his disposal, his vision of Hogwarts Castle seemed suddenly very achievable. Balin led Dewey to where the dragon armor was kept. It occupied its own vast hall. Duir's breath caught when he saw it, a colossal set of silver plate, crafted to cover a dragon from head to tail. The armor came in articulated sections so it could flex and move. Intricate runes and patterns caught and scattered the light from the torches, giving the whole thing an almost living shimmer. If Smaug itself were to wear it, Duir thought, the sight would be terrifying to behold. He wondered how the dwarves had forged something for a dragon, how much metal, how much skill it must have taken. The set was so large it had to be stored alone in a huge chamber. Fortunately, it could be dismantled into parts. With the undetectable extension charm, Duir was barely able to fit the entire set into his spatial bag. Back in the Great Hall, the 1,000 dwarf craftsmen that Thorin had promised had already gathered, along with their tools and equipment. Transporting so many people and materials back to Weathertop the conventional way would be impractical. Duir looked over the dense crowd and turned to Balin. "Can I have a sturdy box? Not too big, something a person could carry." Balin raised a brow, but did not refuse. He had a tin box brought. Under the watchful eyes of the dwarves, Duir cast the undetectable extension charm on the box, expanding its interior until it could hold the entire workforce. He waved his wand again and conjured a ladder inside for the craftsmen to climb down. "The journey to Weathertop is long," Duir said, smiling at the gathered dwarves. "Walking won't do. Please step inside the box for a while and wait until we reach our destination." The dwarves exchanged looks, unsure, until they glanced toward Thorin. He nodded, fully aware of Duir's magic, and the line began. The slimmer dwarves filed through easily, while the more rotund ones got stuck for a moment at the opening and had to be shoved by their companions, prompting hoots of laughter and a few curses. Once inside, the space was enormous. 1,000 dwarves could move about comfortably. "Balin, are you coming?" Duir asked, surprised to see the elder step forward. "Balin leads this company," Thorin said from his throne. "He's answerable for the project." Balin grinned. "While we work together, Duir, if you have any requirements for the castle design, tell me. I trust my architectural skills." "I'll trouble you then," Duir replied gratefully. With Balin in charge of the craftsmen, he felt confident leaving the building in capable hands. Duir sealed the box, took it up, and with Balin and the craftsmen inside, returned to the river valley. From there he gone straight to Weathertop through the fireplace. He stepped out into the hearth, and immediately Edward greeted him. "My lord, you're back!" Duir nodded and said, "I've brought some guests. There are quite a few. Please arrange their accommodation." Edward glanced toward the fireplace, expecting more arrivals, but saw no one else emerging. Confused, he looked at the small tin box Duir carried. Duir only smiled and set the box down. "Don't look there," he said. "They're in here." He opened it and called, "You can come out now." Balin was the first to climb up the ladder, blinking at the sight of Weathertop. "We're here so fast?" he marveled. Then, to Edward's astonishment, dwarf after dwarf clambered out, noisy and boisterous. One fat dwarf got stuck at the opening and had to be hauled out by his companions like a pulled radish, drawing laughter from the others. The first-floor hall filled quickly and grew uproarious. Dwarves were loud by nature, and 1,000 of them made a tremendous din. Poor Edward had never seen anything like it, and stood frozen for a moment. "All right, everyone." Duir's commanding voice cut through the cacophony. The room fell quiet. "Everyone has arrived at Weathertop. Let's get settled. Tonight we will hold a welcome banquet." At the word banquet, every dwarf's face lit up. They loved feasting. Duir had intended to quarter the craftsmen in the 60 floors of the tower. There were more than enough rooms, and he could always expand a room with the undetectable extension charm, but Balin refused. "We prefer tents," he said. "We'll make camp outside." So Duir conjured several large tents on the tower's grounds and expanded their interior spaces. The dwarves moved in and made themselves at home, and by evening, Amon Sul was brilliantly lit. The great hall on the first floor had been infinitely expanded and now comfortably held over 1,000 dwarves and several hundred villagers from Hogsmeade. When Duir announced the banquet, the villagers, his subjects, rallied to help without being asked. Under village chief Luke's direction, they took on roles as butlers, cooks, attendants, bakers, and butchers. Edward had even gone through the fireplace to Bree to purchase all the necessary ingredients and wines. Everyone tried to perform well so as not to embarrass their lord. The banquet was lively. Dwarves sang, laughed, and cheered while the villagers danced spirited country dances. Dwyer sat at the head of the table with Balin and Bilbo on his left and village chief Luke and Edward on his right. Bilbo had come through the fireplace at Dwyer's invitation and chose to sit near his old friend Balin. The two reminisced about their old expedition while Dwyer listened with a smile and exchanged conversation with Luke and Edward. As the dwarves sang, Dwyer waved his wand and conjured a fleet of musical instruments that played along magically, lifting the music. The atmosphere grew raucous and joyful. Only the dragon in the cellar sulked. Another chunk of treasure had vanished, and a magnificent suit of armor would do it no good now. The banquet lasted well into the night. Bilbo returned to Bag End under the moonlight. The villagers walked home down the mountain path, still humming and cheerfully tipsy from the celebrations. The drunken dwarves remained outside, continuing to sing and carouse in their tents, sleep far from their minds. Dwyer stood at a tower window, looking down across the grounds and into the village below. His eyes shone. Being a lord, he reflected, was surprisingly pleasant. Chapter 138, Building the Castle. With the arrival of the dwarf craftsmen, the construction of Weathertop officially began. The dwarves worked like a well-oiled machine, surveying the landscape from the summit to the foothills, refining plans and drafting blueprints. We will build a large castle centered on Amon Sul, covering the entire mountaintop, Balin said, spreading out a full set of plans. I also propose excavating internal passages through the mountain to serve as a back entrance, opening out to the marshes below. Then we can dredge the marsh to form a lake that circles Weathertop. That will give us a natural moat, Balin continued. If the main gate is blocked, troops could use the tunnels to reach a lakeside dock and leave by boat. Dewey nodded along. Balin's plan fit perfectly with his own vision, eerily reminiscent of the Hogwarts in his memory. Proceed with your design, Balin, he said, applauding. I trust your judgment. Balin beamed and puffed up his chest. I will help you build the finest castle you've ever seen. Dewey looked forward to it, and as always, his mind turned to the ledger as well as the walls. The dwarves had agreed to build, but that didn't mean it would be free. Stone, tools, and daily provisions, especially the dwarves' prodigious consumption of ale, would be expensive. There would be a lot to pay for. Down in the cellar, Smaug howled so theatrically it could have out-sorrowed mourning parents. He lay spread over the treasure hoard like a dead pig, clutching coins with his tail and refusing to budge. There's hardly any treasure left, he wailed. And now you want to use it to build a castle? You promised I'd be lying on a mountain of gold. Now there's no mountain, and I still have to hand over coins. Why must my life be so cruel? Dew rolled his eyes and gave him a sharp kick. Get up! Smaug hugged the gold tighter and tried, with the tip of his tail, to slide coins to the far side of his body. Amused, Dewey drew Aglos from his spatial bag and jabbed its tip toward the dragon. At the sight of the spear, Smaug stiffened and grudgingly slid half off the hoard. Dewey put the spear away without expression, opened his spatial bag, and began scooping up coins. Watching the gold disappear made Smaug's heart clench. Master, stop! I'll help! Just leave me some gold! Smaug cried. Dewey paused and cocked an eyebrow. You want to help work? Yes, I'll help build the castle. I can fly heavy stone from the quarries, level ridges with my tail, melt steel with my breath. I'll be far more useful than those greedy dwarves. To save money, Smaug was prepared to sweat. In the following days, the castle crew grew to include, besides the dwarf craftsman, a giant dragon. The dwarves located suitable granite for the castle in the Weathertop Hills to the north. They quarried massive blocks while Smaug carried them through the air to Weathertop, and the dwarves fitted them together like huge masonry pieces. Smaug even flew 1,000 miles to the troll forest to uproot ancient trees for timber. Smaug's colossal presence sped the work immeasurably. Balin estimated a job that would have taken more than a year could now be done in about 3 months. Stone and timber, the most expensive materials, were being supplied directly by Smaug, so the lion's share of cost was covered. The biggest expense turned out to be the ale for 1,000 dwarf craftsmen. The prancing pony's stock was nearly depleted, and innkeeper Mr. Buttercup was overjoyed. Smog glowered at the dwarves every time they staggered back to the inn with mugs in hand. Every coin they spent was a coin taken from his hoard. If it weren't for his master's strict orders, he would happily have swallowed the drunken dwarves whole. Just as Smog's hunger-fueled ire began to show, Dewey rapped the dragon on the forehead with his staff. Smog blinked and sobered up, and the dwarves exhaled in relief. Working with Smog's temper was nearly unbearable. Luke, mayor of Hogsmeade, had offered to send volunteers to help with the build, but Dewey declined. Smog's complaints notwithstanding, the 1/10 share they had taken from the Lonely Mountain was more than enough to fund countless castles. Dewey wasn't short of money and didn't need free labor. Instead, he hired villagers to prepare daily meals for the dwarves. With the food and logistics entrusted to Mayor Luke and his assistant Edward, Dewey retired to his 7th-floor meditation room each day. The world outside buzzed with activity, but in his meditation chamber, nothing penetrated the silence. There he meditated, practiced spells, and studied alchemy. One day, Mr. Buttercup arrived with exciting news. He had found a 7-year-old rooster. Dewey brightened and, by way of the inn's hearth, appeared at the prancing pony. "Where is he?" Dewey asked. Mr. Buttercup bowed with exaggerated respect. "Lord Dewey, he's hale and hearty. I'll bring him right in." He hurried to the backyard and returned with a cage. Inside stood a magnificent rooster, a bright red comb, a metallic sheen to his neck feathers, a sturdy body, a fan-like tail, and a sharp beak and talons. Dewey leaned forward to inspect him. "From the Shire," the innkeeper explained. "An old hobbit raised him for 7 years. I wouldn't deceive you. He's a 7-year-old rooster." Dewey pointed his wand, sending a thin beam of white light at the comb. The rooster trembled, and a glowing number 7 materialized there, confirmation of the age. Dewey allowed himself a satisfied smile. Ordinary roosters rarely lived to 7, and if they did, they'd be scruffy and frail. This one was clearly pampered. "How are the other materials coming?" Dewey asked. Mr. Buttercup's face fell. "I've collected some, Lord, but the ingredients you requested are unusual and difficult to find. It'll take time." "That's fine. Give me what you have. Collect the rest slowly," Dewey said. The innkeeper led him down to the cellar with a mixture of pride and embarrassment. The items Dewey had requested were grotesque enough to frighten ordinary patrons. Jars of crocodile hearts, bat hearts, eel eyeballs, frog brains, newt spleens, pufferfish eyes, and other strange oddities lined the shelves. No wonder Mr. Buttercup didn't show them off. Dewey was pleased. He waved his wand and slipped the ingredients into his spatial bag. "Keep collecting what you can. Show whatever comes, send it to Weathertop. You'll be rewarded." He handed over a pouch of gold. 1,000 gold coins. "Is that enough?" "Enough. More than enough, Lord. Thank you. I'll gather more right away." The innkeeper practically glowed with gratitude. With such pay, he had no hesitation about dealing with grotesque wares. Back at Weathertop, Dewey entrusted the rooster to Edward's care and went to the 8th floor. He flicked his wand and summoned potion cabinets along 3 walls, then meticulously sorted the ingredients by category. With another spell, he lowered the room's temperature and took out cauldrons and other brewing implements. At the door, he tapped once, and a small golden plate reading "Potion Room" affixed itself above the handle. Satisfied with the workshop, Dewey turned to Smog. He produced, with a casual wave, an enormous syringe. "Come here, Smog. I need a little of your blood." Even at Dewey's gentlest smile, the dragon shuddered. "Master, may I refuse?" "No," Dewey said briskly. "It'll barely affect you." Bound by compulsion and habit, Smog submitted. Dewey pressed the syringe to the scaleless patch on the dragon's chest and drew out a tube of blood. It barely pierced the hide, but to Smog it felt like a psychological assault. He would forever after treat the sight of a syringe as a nightmare. The blood was as hot as magma. Dewey used a levitation charm to handle the syringe and sealed the sample in a heat-resistant glass vial. Back in the potion room with the boiling hot sample in safekeeping, Dewey prepared himself. This time, he intended to brew a very obscure, very complicated potion. 140. Gold and silver trees. In the potion room, Dewey set up the cauldron and lit the fire. He added dew he had collected on the night of a full moon. When the water reached a boil, he poured in 2 spoonfuls of mugwort infusion and stirred 6 times clockwise, then then 6 times counterclockwise. Next, he added 6 drops of earthworm extract, stirring once clockwise and once counterclockwise after each drop until the extract was fully incorporated. The mixture turned green, giving off a bitter, earthy scent. Dewey lowered the heat and added 10 drops of dragon blood one after another. The liquid reddened and then simmered gently for 3 days. On the 4th day, he added figs and continued to boil for another day. He stopped the fire, filtered the brew 3 times to remove impurities, then returned it to the cauldron and added 7 drops of giant spider venom, stirring 7 times clockwise and once counterclockwise. After a vigorous boil for 15 minutes, he added 7 strands of Legolas's hair, generously contributed by Legolas himself. This step normally calls for unicorn hair, but since no unicorns existed in this world, Dewey substituted elf hair. The result was successful. He removed the cauldron from the fire and let it cool naturally, then waited 7 days. On the 7th day, the liquid had become bright silver, like quicksilver. The growth potion, used to accelerate the growth of magical plants, was complete. Dewey poured it into crystal bottles, filling 3 in total, and placed them in an empty potion cabinet. Growth potion is specialized, used chiefly to speed the growth of magical herbs. Outside of estate owners who cultivate potion plants and herbology masters, few know of it. Dewey himself had only learned the recipe after gaining Professor Sprout's memories. With the potion ready, he grabbed a bottle and left the potion room. Outside, the dwarf craftsmen were busily building the castle, operating pulleys and machinery with practiced efficiency. The castle's foundation, sprawling across the mountaintop, was gradually taking shape. A dragon, economical and powerful, was airlifting massive stones and timbers from afar, saving manpower and materials. Dewey did not disturb them. He headed alone to the garden area laid out by the castle designer, Balin. At the garden's center was a magically warded plot that only Dewey could approach. There, he had buried the white tree and melon tree seeds. He had enclosed the planting beds in stone. 100 meters apart, 2 tiny sprouts had just broken the soil. Both were extraordinary. One sprout glowed golden in the sun, radiating warm energy like a little sun. The other gleamed silver-white, cool and sacred like moonlight. Ever since planting the seeds, Dewey had watered them regularly with stream water Galadriel had given him. The sprouts had been slow to appear, and he'd feared something had gone wrong, until a few days ago when they finally emerged. Dewey uncorked the freshly made growth potion and put a single drop on the melon sprout. The potion soaked in at once, and under his expectant gaze, the sprout accelerated visibly. In a few breaths, it transformed from a tender seedling into a small tree 1/2 meter tall. 1 drop equaled about a month's growth. Delighted, Dewey added 10 more drops in quick succession. The melon tree surged upward, soon taller than he was, as if time itself had been sped up. Not far off, the dwarves noticed something casting a shadow over their work. When they looked, their mouths fell open. In the center of the garden, a tree, at least 20 meters tall, had appeared and was still growing. It was tall, straight, and beautiful. Silver-gray bark, broad fan-shaped leaves that seemed made of gold, sparkling in the sunlight. The entire tree shimmered with golden light. It perfectly matched the dwarves' aesthetic. Balin, the eldest and well-traveled, stepped forward and guessed at once, "Is this a melon tree from Lorien? It truly lives up to its name." Balin was even more astonished to learn the tree had sprung up on Weathertop and so quickly. Then, 100 meters away, another marvel unfolded. A silver-white tree was rising fast. It was less straight than the melon tree, more winding, like a coiled dragon. Its dense leaves were dark green on top, silver beneath, reflecting a cool, misty light. It exuded nobility and sanctity. The 2 great trees, gold and silver, brightened the garden and seemed to freshen the very air. Dewey could feel it most clearly. The magical energy around them had thickened. The white tree's power rippled outward. Where it touched, life flourished. Grass and leaves stayed lush and evergreen, flowers bloomed without end, and bodies felt lighter and healthier. He still had half of the growth potion left, but he did not force the trees to grow faster. Growth potion was not a cure-all. Over-accelerating growth would drain a plant's essence and foundation. Instead, Dewey picked some leaves from both trees. The sap of the white tree healed wounds, neutralized toxins, and dispelled dark magics. The melon tree leaves were used by the Elves of Lorien to wrap landboss provisions, preserving them for a long time. Landboss came from melon fruit, rich in nutrients, restoring energy and aiding recovery. One piece could sustain a day's journey. Dewey intended to use these leaves as reserve potion ingredients. He still had one practical trick left. Pulling out a spatial bag, Dewey cast a bubblehead charm on himself to block the stench and poured the bag's contents at the tree's roots. It was dragon dung fertilizer, the best for enriching soil. Professor Sprout had favored dragon dung in herbology lessons, and the fertilizer from Smaug himself had even greater potency. Dewey held his nose and applied it, enduring Smaug's bemused expression as the dragon had thoughtfully set aside a toilet area. After covering the dung with soil, Dewey quickly departed, cast a few cleaning charms on himself, and still noticed a faint, unpleasant odor clinging to his clothes. Back in the tower, Dewey went to the 6th floor herbology garden and entered the room where the king's grass was grown. Warm air greeted him. The space was several times the size of a football field. The ceiling disappeared into a painted blue sky with soft clouds. Sunlight filled the area, a gentle breeze rippled across a lake, and water lilies and aquatic plants swayed. The environment had been transformed into a living scene. Grass, flowers, and shrubs covered the ground. Butterflies danced and fish swam. The king's grass border, once withered when he'd planted it, was now lush and sprouting new leaves. Dewey conjured a watering can, dropped some growth potion into it, and diluted it with water, then sprinkled it across the king's grass. The plants grew rapidly, flowering and setting seed. When the seeds ripened, he waved his hand to collect them, scattered them elsewhere, and watered again. The seeds germinated at once, sprouted, and grew fast. What had been 100 or so king's grass plants had become a whole stand. "With this much king's grass, I won't have to worry about running out," he said, satisfied. He then sprinkled dragon dung fertilizer to further enrich the soil. He remembered another planting he had hidden and waved his wand. "Guide me." A beam of light shot from his wand toward the hillside on the opposite side of the lake. He walked around the shore to the spot the spell indicated and found a plant hidden in the grass. "So you were hiding here," he laughed, grabbing it by the head and pulling it free. It was the mandrake he had cultivated earlier. Angered at being uprooted, the mandrake twisted and tried to break free, emitting a deadly scream. Dewey had already cast a silencing charm on himself and merely teased the plant as it shot venomous glares. When he had toyed with it long enough, he fed it 3 drops of growth potion with a dropper. The mandrake quieted, licked its lips, and looked up at him expectantly. "You really are a glutton," Dewey said, smiling, and gave it 3 more drops before placing it on the ground. The moment it touched the soil, the mandrake burrowed in and then erupted in a burst of growth, blooming with purple flowers. The flowers soon withered and set 3 orange fruits like small apples. When the fruits neared ripeness, Dewey picked them, sliced them open with a silver knife, and extracted the seeds. Mandrake fruit pulp is a rare, high-grade potion ingredient. He bottled the pulp in crystal vials and buried the seeds, watering them with growth potion. Soon, 3 new mandrakes pushed through the earth and sprang up. These newborn mandrakes were naturally magical and no longer required the constant magical coaxing Dewey had given earlier. He still scattered dragon dung fertilizer to help them establish. After finishing with the king's grass and the mandrakes, Dewey moved through the other rooms, using growth potion to accelerate growth and dragon dung to enrich the soil. By the time he left the herbology garden, all his growth potion and dragon dung were used up, and the results pleased him deeply. His magical plants and herbs were now well established. He could be self-sufficient.